Okay, call to order the Rockport Select Board meeting of Monday, November 13. John, you've got town manager's report?
Yes. Since we last met, there's been quite a bit of activity on a number of fronts. Obviously, the election is probably the most notable item that we had cross through our office. Obviously, we had a really good turnout, I think, surprisingly good turnout for an election without a lot on the ballot that's all that exciting, to be honest, unless you really love charter amendments, and I'm not sure why you would. But nevertheless, we had about a third of our residents show up, or I should say a third of our registered voters show up to vote. And that's a pretty good turnout, given there wasn't a lot that really was driving people to the polls, surprisingly, for that. So very pleased with that. I would probably take this opportunity to take note of the report I put in about the Water Resource Recovery Task Force. That's the group that has been charged with looking at options for places potentially where and the pros and cons of each of where we could place a water resource recovery facility, which for those of you who really want to know what that is, it's a sewer treatment plant. But that's what they're called now, so we use the new language, and here we go. We had a little bit of a tour late last week, and drove around town visiting a variety of sites, and also had a chance to meet with our friends at the hospital, at Penn Bay Hospital, and looked at their facility before getting in the car and driving up to Lincolnville. And we've talked about this with this group, with the select board, but for those who may be the first time they've listened, Lincolnville Beach has their own water resource recovery facility right at the beach. It's tucked in sort of between Route 1 and the ferry terminal, if you're familiar with that place of the world. And as I wouldn't even say as water resource recovery facilities go, I'd say even as your old sewer plants go, whatever language you want to use, it's remarkably clean, odorless, quiet. You would not know what it was, even if you're in there and opening hatches. Michael got a chance to go along for the ride, and really impressive when you look at the facility. And not only that, the thing that sort of struck me, but there's a building there with a lot of the equipment and the machinery and the pumps and whatnot that are inside. But the odor control building is part of, or odor control facility is part of that building. And I would say the odor control area is closer to its next house than Jeff is to me. And hi, Jeff. And so we're talking less than 20 feet between the odor control and the neighbors. And again, this was the wind was not blowing 35 miles an hour in one direction or another. I mean, it was pretty placid, and it was remarkable to me about how quiet and how unassuming the whole effort was. So I think that gives confidence. That's one such technology that the town of Rockport could use if they agreed to pursue building a plant. There are two other facilities that Woodard & Curran has suggested to the group to attend and view and study, one in Bridgeton and one in Oxford. And both of those use different technologies than what we saw. And one is actually a bit in construction as well. So you get to see sort of how difficult it can be, because obviously nothing is easy when you're in the middle of a construction project. And so we'll get a chance to look at that. And I believe that's going to be on the 21st. So that's pretty exciting. Again, that group's work is ongoing, regular meetings, and they'll be hashing out sort of their public participation process at their next meeting in early December. So stay tuned for that, and I'll continue to sort of throw those things in my report as they continue. Again, that group is really self-directed in large part. We've sort of given them the keys to work this. We have a lot of really smart people who really care about trying to get a good solution and prepare a a decision-making matrix that the residents can look at and say, well, that seems right for us. No, that seems like a terrible idea. Not just sort of force-feeding an idea, really lay it out and give us, and give the board, too, options in terms of where do we go next. So I think that's a great effort. The comprehensive plan, we talked a little bit a couple months ago about where does that progress stand and where are we on that creation. So comprehensive plan is about half done, or at least in draft form. So 6 of the 12 chapters are complete. Among the 6 to be done are the finance and governance section, and that will be something that will be a draft of that will come before this group to look at and mark up as needed. Orion's plan is to have the entire document, all 12 sections, done in early January. So that should give a lot of time, but in some cases you could argue it's not enough time because, using the old comprehensive plan, the 2003 effort, they were seemingly talking with residents for years. So again, see where it goes, see where it comes to, but obviously there's a real need to start to put that comprehensive plan in place so that you and the planning board and the ORC and all these different groups that are trying to figure out what's next for Rockport can use that as the building block from which you can jump off of. So that's an important
That's great. I
piece.
appreciate the effort of Orion, because I know that's a tight schedule, but I think it is really important to get that document done.
Absolutely. And to echo, double down on that effort, I think we have so many people who've moved here in the last 5 years that, the Rockport, even if we were to write this plan 5 years ago, I don't know if it would be the same plan it would be today. Rockport it's changing and growing. Every day it's changing and growing. And making sure that we're talking about a plan that's about tomorrow and not about what was is really, really crucial and needs to give the 5 of you and all the others who are involved in town government that comfort that this is our baseline and this is where we're going. So we have that roadmap we all need to do our jobs. So very exciting on that end.
Great.
Want to give an update, and Scott Bickford's here, our trustee code officer. The 150 Park Street property, basically where we are is I share with you the memo that Scott had drafted a couple weeks ago, and we've had some great progress. Property owner has been really working with us. Scott had a chance to go out to the site with Mike Sabatini, engineer, and look at the property and made some determinations from there. The next steps really are about working with contractors, working with CMP, working with some of those steps that are a little bit harder for a homeowner or a town or anyone else to really set firm guidelines on. And then I also mentioned the delay in terms of the contractor. One thing in Maine law, I don't know, it was about 10 years ago, that the best practices. So Maine DEP, there's a certification program for contractors who work within the shoreland. And about a decade ago or so, they placed this requirement that work within the shoreland requires that certification. There's some miscommunication in terms of who was required and when that was required. So and Scott, we were talking about this tonight about there's some ways in which Scott can oversee that effort perhaps and work with contractors. Working in the shoreland it has its own set of challenges, and obviously you worry about erosion control measures and silt fencing and on, hay bales where they need to be. But those are overcome. Those are obstacles that can be overcome, and we're in at a good positive place. I don't want to speak for you, Scott, but at least in terms of from my perspective, I think we're in a good place in terms of that project. And I know this is something that was really before the board, and there's some board decision making, but at least in terms of from the staff side, from my seat, and I think from Scott's seat, I think we're making some good progress, and I think we're moving forward. The board meets again on December, I believe 11th. I think is your next meeting.
Yep.
And I'll continue to put this in my packet just to let you know if there's anything that you have questions or concerns. I look at this very much as a board decision and sort of, but I want you to see sort of where it's going and how we're making progress along that way.
Yeah, or if there are things we can do that could help keep it moving or get it, if it does get stuck.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
still standing in December? I mean,
Yeah, hopefully the goal is it's down.
I would like to say not, but I think that the application for the demolition's been applied for. The CMP has to remove their line. I mean, you know better than me how easy that might be to do or not do. So maybe I'll ask you,
depends on
Jim.
how busy they are.
Yeah, I don't know. But I think the permitting, the DEP side, I think that's something Scott could work through with the contractor. Both the contractors, I think that had talked, are contractors you're familiar with and have worked with, so.
I am one.
Oh, one of the two, okay, all right. And you know, that, for a code officer or a plumbing inspector, that sometimes can be worth its weight in just having that confidence and that know-how, so.
So who decides who's gonna do it? Do you or she?
You don't know. You only decide who's gonna do the work.
So you've only got one. Not much of a decision to
The
make.
one that I know, but
Oh,
neither are certified. That's the problem.
Right.
yeah, yeah.
But I'm pushing on that to see if the state will agree that my certification in shoreland zoning would cover the person doing the work, then I would take control of that and make it happen sooner, hopefully.
Mhm.
The other faraway option that I'd rather not think about is the homeowner can take the responsibility. But that puts quite a risk on a homeowner.
That's a lot.
And just to clarify, because when people hear the term shoreland, I think most people think of ocean.
Yeah.
So people are at home confused, like, what do you mean shoreland? Because there's a brook, is it? Or-
Yep.
Yeah.
Goose River. So in that case,
Okay.
Goose River is the body of water you're worried about, but it can be forested wetlands. It could be anything that's deemed on our map, our zoning map, our shoreline zoning map, that falls within that criteria. And the state decides in large part what those areas should be in terms of, and then the towns have the right to draw their map. The state has to then agree to that map, but there's a collaboration, I suppose, at times with the state and the local authorities to determine what is shoreline, what isn't shoreline. In this case, it's pretty clear it's Goose River,
Yeah.
but in some cases, it's
And
not
that
as
was
clear.
decided long ago.
Long ago.
So the only delay for this is because it's so close to Goose River that you need the certified thing. Okay. Just
Precisely.
for anybody that,
Yes, thank you.
okay.
That's great. Yeah.
So any potential hazards have been taken care of? Because I know that was one of the concerns about it being a dangerous building. Yeah,
Yeah, no, that would be a no.
Can you hear me all right?
yes,
Okay.
I can hear you.
The answer is, she has said, there's no need for us to board up the doors and the windows that's open, because we're gonna be tearing it right down, and that's just spending money, or something to that effect. And at the time, I thought that was gonna be true, but then I found that she didn't know about the best management practice problem. She does now. And that, I wished I had brought that up to her sooner, but I'm pushing through with it, and I think she's gonna respond appropriately.
In terms of making it safe?
Yeah, to make it work. Hopefully it'll come down before we have to worry about somebody being hurt.
So I guess the question is, are you, as the CEO, satisfied with the progress on the property?
I think that we're about where we belong right now.
Okay.
I expected that it'd go a little bit slow, and it has, but I think that John has said it about right. And I hope that if it gets cold, it gets cold. I can't control the weather, and they should have done this sooner.
Yeah, and some of the delay is not caused by the homeowner dragging her feet. It's because of this issue of needing a certified demolition contractor.
At this point, yes, that's slowed it down a little bit more.
Okay, well,
Good. Enough
So,
said.
stay tuned, I
yeah,
suppose,
stay
on that one.
tuned, and maybe in December it will all be taken care of.
That's right, yeah. Moving on, West Rockport Fire Station, things have been a bit slowed. We're waiting for some rebar to show up so we can, they can start pouring footings and we can get into plumbing and get going. So a little bit behind on that side of things, but we're moving. Meeting this week. I mentioned the cistern that was found that was really like just on the corner of the new building. Like you couldn't have made it up. It was like perfect. Perfectly in the wrong place. So anyway, working around that, just another part of building and, you know, all the fun. Mentioned really quickly, we've had some paving going on here over the last few weeks. Probably the best project that came out was the town office parking lot. I think that came out great, really happy with that. Some of the other efforts are still in process. Again, cold weather, paving do not mix well. So Camden Street will be paved. There's one more coat of pavement that will go on that stretch of road. We had pavers out at Forest Street, at Forest Glen, Bonnie Street today. They will be out to Kathy's Lane after that. So that's a pretty, that should wrap up by Thursday. We should be wrapped up with our street paving for this year. We did have to add a little bit of work onto Mechanic Street. There was a water, for those who've been through that area, there's been a main water project on that stretch of road throughout the summer. And the paving of that, just on a number of different levels, left a project that was not really great. It really wasn't a good result. I don't think Maine Water was happy with it. I don't think the paving company was happy with it. And surely we had residents who weren't happy with it. So we went over that with a light coat of shim to simply put that together. That is, as you'll see in our capital planning budget here in December, that's an area that has been sort of targeted as an area that we may want a bigger project on, a little bit of drainage, but sidewalks and the like. But given some more immediate needs, Main Street being one, Meadow Street, some culvert projects, it's probably going to have to wait a little bit longer. So get a good coat of pavement on that to hold that together for a little bit of time before we can come back and do what I think we had hoped to do to Mechanic Street. And I know it's going to take a lot more planning, working with residents, moving poles. I mean, there's a lot that goes into that. For those who've been down that stretch of road, you know, the sidewalk, there's a pole right in the middle of the sidewalk every single, it's
Well,
it's
we have
not
those
great.
double CMP poles, and we've got to get
Yeah.
rid of those. We
Absolutely.
need Ally, who across the street here with a phone call was finally able to get rid of the double pole.
Yeah,
Get
it's
her on
terrible.
that.
It's terrible. So anyway, so that's been going on. I did put in there a note about the new parking bans that the board talked about, so hopefully people got some notice on that. And I do want to mention, lastly, the issue with kayak storage. So for those of you all obviously recall, the board approved a change to the kayak policy, which as of November 15th means that there's no kayak storage over the winter. There's no winter storage of kayaks. We still have many kayaks that are down at the harbor. And so.
And now I've seen some new dinghies getting put up on that rack. They're like, oh, cool, there's space. I'll just throw my dinghy for the winter.
So those are going to end up probably in an undisclosed location under lock and key. And I would suggest if you currently have your dinghy there, say go get it, because all those racks will be empty.
I wonder if some signage on the racks
Yeah.
themselves, because right now it just has the main sport, you know, for $250 you can winter store it, but there's nothing on the rack saying
That's a good idea.
must be removed by November 15th, no
Right.
dinghy storage allowed, or,
Yeah.
2 days.
Right,
Yeah.
right. It's Wednesday
yeah.
So
And they're still pretty full.
there's been a great deal of outreach to those who have there, but are using those kayak storage racks, but look, there's going to be quite a few left over. So it's going to be a bit of a mess, and we'll have to deal with that. And it's a new policy, and so anytime you have something new, these things occur. But if you're watching, all 5 of you, please make sure you get those kayaks out of there. So excuse me, 8. We have 8 of you. Sorry to the 3 of you. Make sure those kayaks, you can get them out by Wednesday.
Your report mentions until the appropriate fee is paid. So will they, the ones that we have to remove because they didn't make it on time, is there a fee that?
There's a $100 fee that was in the policy.
Okay.
So they'll have to, because largely we'll have to take staff to go over there and
Right,
load
it's
up a
going to cost us
flatbed.
money to do this, yeah.
Right, and we'll
Good.
be storing, so it's, and we, obviously, we don't want it to have it be less expensive than going to Main Sport either. So, something to think about perhaps in the future, but in the event. So, that's largely the report as it is today, so.
Okay. I had a question on the general assistance
Oh, yeah.
numbers. So the state allocated $8.5 million, and we got 368 of that? Is that right?
Big users. Yeah, no, we've, I think it's largely based upon our use, and
Okay,
our friends in the city of Portland have an
Got the
incredible
lion's share.
cost, as, we see, every time we see them clear out encampments, so. But that is a program that may continue, though that was a one-time infusion of $300. It seems like they're going to try to true that up with the communities because they know that we're bearing incredible GA costs. There have been some changes in terms of how Rockport Suites, who was one that was taking some vouchers for us, and Schooner Bay are operating. There's some changes in ownership, and that may change our GA outlay because of the availability of those places as for housing. But largely, we're still in the same spot we are. We have a lot more people who need help than we can offer them help in Rockport. So,
great. Okay. Thanks, John.
thanks.
Consent agenda.
We forgot the public input.
Oh, you're right, public input on non-agenda items. And amendments to the agenda, I actually have an amendment to the agenda. We need to make a payment to Camden for the sewer, and so if we could just add that to the wastewater commissioners portion of the agenda. Okay. Any other amendments? Okay, the consent agenda. I have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Which is approving the meetings,
The
minutes from last time.
So moved.
Kim, a second?
Sure, I'll second it.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Great. Next on the agenda is, we have an application from Scott McPherson to join the Harbor Committee. And Scott is here. You've got his application and information in the packet. Scott, do you want to come up and just introduce yourself?
I am Scott.
I think
Yeah,
Jeff
you
needs
wanna
you at the
go to the-
microphone.
The hot seat.
Hot seat, yeah.
Yeah, right. Hello. Thank you for volunteering for the Harbor Committee. I see that Sam Temple, the chairman of the Harbor Committee, is an enthusiastic endorsement as well. But give us a little bit of background information on your interest in the Harbor Committee.
I was approached by Sam, and then I started looking into it, and I thought, well, all right, so I've been a part of the community for 2 decades and on the water since then, and noting a lot of changes also, but wanting to be involved with the community. And I mean, I see that the harbor is one of the unique spots where we live, in that it's easily accessible, and we have events there that draw people in. And wanting to be a part of that and see what we can offer. So,
That makes sense.
Great, great.
Yeah.
Any questions?
I wrote a bunch in them.
Yeah, you gave us some information too, which is helpful. Appreciate you taking the time to do that.
Yeah.
Because it is, I mean, it is the sort of heart of our community in so many ways. An important resource. Okay. Do we have a motion to approve Scott's application?
Yeah, I move the board approve Scott McPherson's Harbor Committee application with the term expiring June 2025.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor? Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
I look forward to it.
Welcome
I
to the
appreciate
Harbor
it
Committee.
for the
Glad to
opportunity.
have you. Okay, next we have the committee work plans.
Yes, so this is, we had, let's see, who was the, library? We had the library work plan, did we? I can't remember,
Library
yeah.
committee.
So this is work plan season. This is where the board has an opportunity to weigh in and provide feedback and then really approve of what these committees want to do for the next 12 months. And in some cases, it requires it comes in part with a funding request that will plug into your budget. But in some cases, there's sort of just broad policy areas or maintenance areas or sort of directive that they are saying, this is how we want to work over the next 12 months. And this is really your opportunity to interface with those committees, or in some cases, just their liaison. So Jason's here who's our staff person on the Recreation Committee, and this is also your time when you can certainly add things to the work plan too. So if there's something that you feel, boy, we really need to have, paint all the sheds at Marge Jones pink, okay, then now's a time to sort of think about how you want to integrate the voice of the board in how these committees work. So in this case, with the Recreation Committee, largely this is sort of a continuation of the effort that started last fall. 2 falls ago, it was really trying to get the field and Marge Jones, the whole facility, up to a standard that was safe. One, because we actually had some events that could have been canceled and were canceled because of safety. The first year I was here, and now it's also to get it to I'd say Jason has worked overtime and then some to get us to a place where it's a source of pride for our community. Okay. Now, then last fall, there was the initiation of a capital campaign to look at some other needs that are maybe outside of what should come from taxpayers, but could be funded from those who are excited or interested in particular aspects of the facility. And the pickleball community is loud and energized and engaged. So we've been trying to tap in. They'll be meeting with the Recreation Committee in December. But there was a lot of interest in trying to support expansion of some pickleball efforts there at the fields. So that happened. And then we also had the RES. The Leshers came forward no more than a month later. And so there's a little bit of sort of 2 things going on at once here. But this is an existing facility that has been used and is being used by kids throughout the 5 towns and beyond, and then pickleballers from who knows where. So we've got it's a real gem, and now our job is in terms of the town, keep it up to that standard that we worked so hard to meet, and then if there are interests and if there are things beyond that, how do we find alternatives to the taxpayer to perhaps adding those new pieces of the puzzle? So that's really been the Rec Committee's focus. Did I miss anything, Jason, or that's good? Okay.
Yeah, that's so great to hear that it's come along so well. It occurred to me as we're doing the RES site discussions with the community that I think a lot of people aren't really aware of the assets we have at Marge Jones. And I'm thinking tomorrow night, there's a session at Simonton Hall, and maybe I'll talk to you in the morning and just get a list of what to tell people so that we don't try to recreate
Right.
at RES what is available at Marge Jones, and also to let the community know these are things actually available now to them.
Absolutely.
Which is
Yeah, absolutely.
pretty
And,
cool.
I mean, so the field's, it's shy of 30 years old, and it does meet the needs of multiple seasons of team sports and recreational sports, and we're abutting to the school, so there's some potential there of working with our schools. There's a lot of possibilities there, but it's sort of nestled in the woods.
Yeah.
And if you didn't have a reason to be there, you wouldn't know.
No,
Whereas if you pull up to Route 90 and Route 1 intersection and you see whatever you see on that field at RES, you sort of, oh, well, this is where it is.
yeah,
That place in the spring, when there's a Little League game, when there's a softball game going on, there's pickleball, and people are using the Babe Ruth field, that place is it's a mob scene. It's crazy in there. And so there's making sure that those voices and those needs are also part of that. And like I said, don't duplicate, enhance maybe, what are the ways that,
Right.
to deal with those things. So,
yeah.
yeah,
Just build great community or recreational facilities for our community.
absolutely. Yep.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Oh, do we have to approve, can we approve them all together, or?
You could, yeah.
What do you guys think?
Let's,
I have a question.
Oh, okay.
What's our current comments of the paving the gardens?
I think it's okay, as I understand it.
It was resolved?
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't have the same response, sort of the years since COVID, and this last year was lightly, used in terms of the garden, and so I think it was,
Plus gardens suck.
And there's more room, this is a bad
Didn't
start in
help.
the summer.
didn't help, yeah,
And I think there's still a lot of room at Erickson Field for.
yeah.
Yeah, so do I. I just want to
No,
make
that's
sure
okay.
that this is not a recurring
Right,
concern, that in a month, we're going to hear about that being an issue again.
I think it's to bed, but I also never say never on some of these things. So
Okay.
I think all parties, I think the Parks and Beautification Committee, which the group that really sort of shepherded
Right,
the
yeah.
community garden through, understands sort of where that's, and then the options to go elsewhere.
Right, and there really was quite a lack of interest this year
Yeah.
on the part of the public.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think there was some confusion up front on some of this. So,
Yeah.
well, my opinion. And the fundraising, how's that been going?
Slow.
Yeah, that's what I figured, but
Yeah.
thought I'd ask since it's on there.
Yeah.
Doesn't hurt to continue it, I was just curious.
Yeah. It's been
Maybe
slow.
the pickleballers, don't they want to raise some money?
Well, I think that's really the hope of meeting in December. I'm not sure if there's some communication wires crossed or something isn't hitting, but for as much enthusiasm as I see and hear from that group, it has not sort of borne fruit on the fundraising side. So
Yeah.
maybe we needed some connections. And also, the MRC is going through their own capital campaign,
Yeah.
where they're building some pickleball courts as well behind Eric. So, or I guess adjacent to you, I guess, but.
Well, somewhere in there.
Yeah, and so as a result, there's a lot, but from those who use Marge Jones, and there's a large number of people who do, and Rockport residents at that, they see a real need of ensuring Marge Jones is a strong place for pickleball. So we'll see what happens with the meeting in December, and there may be some things that come into the budget process that are impacted by that, but. Largely a lot of the new things we're trying to do there, apart from the basics, like the resurfacing, which has been part of a reserve for eons. The new things, we're trying to really use fundraising. And
Yeah.
if there's interest, then
And the
You know.
people interested should help
exactly.
support the process.
Are
Exactly.
there fees paid, like when people use the ball fields, or is there any?
No.
The leagues
Well-
pay a fee.
The leagues pay a fee, but there isn't like, I'm going to close out the court because we're gonna have a tournament. That's what I would meant. Like, that's one thing pickleball's talked about, is the idea of saying, well, could we put on a fundraiser as, you know, for a tournament and have the proceeds come back to the town? That was sort of,
That would be fine.
right, you know, to support this sort of effort. And there's a lot of people who show up for these tournaments, so.
Yeah.
It seems like it could be a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, what did we get at the race for the donut, you know, the
Yeah.
donut festival was
It was
you know, almost
gangbusters.
200 people willing to pay $25 each just
Yeah.
to run the course.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Okay. So should we go through all three and vote at once, or should we do them individually?
We could do them all at once.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Harbor Committee,
I move the board approve the 3 work plans as presented.
do we want to go over each of them at all, or just, do we have anybody else here from,
I don't
The other
think
committees?
so, no.
okay, and did everybody get a chance to look at them and?
Yep.
Yep, okay. Go ahead, Jim. Actually, I had a question, John, maybe you know this, Jim,
Yeah.
just hold on first. On the Harbor Committee, it says submit letter of intent as requested by the town manager.
Yeah,
What is that?
I don't know. I was hoping you would ask me. No, I don't know. What I've talked with the
Do
Harbor
you think it
Committee.
has to do with the collaborative structure?
Yes. Well, in part, but also this sort of master planning and working with all these different entities, right? To try to get us to a place where the boat club, the Harbor Committee, the Conservation Commission are all in, that, I think that's where that's coming from. To give you a sense of what I'm talking about here. So we've been hearing from all these different entities about, well, you know, we can't do this, so we've got to do it this way. And there's a lot of different, I'm not saying cooks in the kitchen,
Well, I'm going to interject
But-
for a second. Entities being,
committees,
okay.
private business
Outside
people, yeah, outside groups, painters, yoga.
That's helpful.
There's a lot of users of the harbor,
Okay.
right? And what we are in need of, I think, is to try to put all those different ideas, just like you would with a comprehensive plan, and put them together. I'll give you one example, and this is sort of, you know, I might get an egg in the back of my head from someone driving by, but, so, for example, you know, what people call the fisherman's side of the harbor, right? Which is the dirt area where we currently have boat storage for winter harbor, the winter, you know. There's a lot of reasons why it has to, there's certain uses that are in that space. The fishermen need a place to park, right? That's part of their ability to work out of there. They need a place to park their trucks, and so they can get in and get out and do what they got to do, right? We know that. We've got a need for float storage. That's also something that's used there. We also have, you know, times where people park overnight in the summer. That's also a use there. There's all these different pieces that kind of go into it all, right? And so I don't know if if it's ever been sat down and put all those things on the table and say, okay, well, what is the one how can we make sure there's some sort of overarching rules and regulations of this place that makes sense for everybody? I've heard don't pave it because of these reasons. I've heard pave it because of these other reasons. So speaking with one voice, and that's the thing about the comprehensive plan, that allows you as a board and as a town and all of us who work for the town and do all we do to say, oh, this is what the town wants us to do. But we've worked through the bugs. You know, we've worked through the bugs of what this policy might be or what it might not be. And, you know, we don't have enough fishermen to park through that whole area. There aren't enough fishermen fishing in Rockport Harbor right now to do that. But we also have Skyhook park their truck when they're not, you know, working with their masks. Okay.
During the season, right?
Right. But, you know, so there's just a whole bunch of different uses, right? And how do we make sure they all fit together or not? And how do we make sure that Rockport Harbor stays Rockport Harbor and doesn't become Rockport, Mass, or, you know, some other place that we don't want to be? But it takes kind of a little bit of thinking ahead and not just hoping and wishing it's not going to happen to us, because unfortunately, it's going to happen. I just, real quickly, we were in a meeting today, and I called up, I was showing them the clip of Real People, when Real People came to look at Andre. And it was midsummer, and you could count the number of boats that were in the harbor. And I'm like, if you could lay that on top of like what we have now in the middle of that harbor, it would like shock you. It's changed, and even like I was surprised. I'm like, oh my gosh, look how few there are. It's just natural. It happens, but if we're not careful, it won't be what we thought. What we have now won't be what we have 10 years from now. Never mind climate change. Never mind all these other things that are happening. So that's why I'm talking about a bigger effort here to make sure we're being smart and proactive about how we're approaching the harbor and not someday regretting what happened to it. So that's what I think this letter of intent means.
You know, I guess I'm thinking that because the harbor is such an important aspect of our town, I'd really like a harbor, you know, whether it's Sam or someone else from the harbor committee, to come talk to us about their work plan. So that makes me think that we could approve the other two, because Conservation Committee has quite a bit of information in here. And I don't know if you feel differently about that, but I feel like...
And I expect they'll be here actually next time, Denise, because they have some harbor rules and their new fee schedule.
Well, perfect. Let's just move that to December for the harbor committee, if that's all right with, what do you guys think?
I'm okay with
fine with
that,
that.
yeah.
Okay. So maybe we approve Recreation and Conservation Committee work plans here?
Well, there's not much in there.
There's
There's
not
only
much to
four
the work
lines
plan.
in their
Yeah.
work plan. So, I mean, we don't have to approve specifics of it.
I almost might like a little more information.
Oh, we definitely, yeah. I mean, my guess is, if I'm not going down the wrong direction, is that their plans that they're going to be working on would then come to us for approval.
Yeah, I guess it just depends on how engaged we want to be at the work plan level, or we just wait to see what they want to bring to us over time.
And I was wondering, too, if this referred to just the potential competing goals between harbor and parks, you know.
Number 4, or, because number
well,
3
3
talks
and 4
about it.
together.
Yeah.
That's what I'm wondering, is like,
Yeah,
It does.
yeah.
okay.
And I think that's part of this as well, right? Is that I think that there's a discussion that's been held between the two groups. Eric was there, right? You went to the meeting last spring, right? And I think that there's a good understanding of what it could be and what it should be, and there's some policy work that could go into that that I was given last month after I attended the Parks meeting in October. But that policy work really needs some sharpening, and I think it needs some review by you, with taking some time. And having the Harbor Committee and to talk about that as well is probably a good idea on the same night. They're gonna have harbor rules, there's gonna be the parks rules, and to try to line it up as best you can, because really you're the arbiter of what's right and what's
So
wrong.
we'll have to make the decision.
You know, but to, you
Priorities,
know,
but-
when Eric's talked about this quite a bit, maybe you want to talk about, but just, there's been a bit discussion about that,
Yeah,
right?
It's just been, it was kind of getting a little out of hand on the respect that one group wants one thing and the other group wants something else, and they were at polar opposites, basically. So it kind of came down to, okay, you guys need to meet and figure it out. So that's where this all came about. And in the end, it eventually smoothed out, and they at least have some moving forward plan now, so that if it's parks and on land, it's parks, and if it's water, then it's harbor. You know, so it kind of worked out some of the problems, and all of that basically stemmed from the sauna really is, but even before that, there were issues, but the sauna just kind of brought it all up to the point where it's like, Parks is like, yeah, absolutely not, and Harbor Committee's like, yeah,
What do we care?
yeah.
It's not in the harbor.
Right. So it kind of came down to this whole thing, and at least we've got them talking, and that's the important part
They actually
is,
have a pretty detailed document.
yeah, that it really,
articulates what,
right, who's in charge of what and where it comes down to and who sees what for approvals of, and then it comes through, and then whether we need to interject and come up with a solution on permitting or whatever. And I kind of almost like to see the same thing with the sea level resilience and and the Conservation Commission happening. Because we don't need two committees looking at things separately, especially when Conservation Commission is so involved.
and has a grant to deal with
Yeah,
that.
with that, the Harbor Committee, yes, should be involved, but I think kind of in a way in which they're just supporting or at least working with the Conservation Commission in this point, and not independently of.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good point for them to come and talk to us so that we can talk to Sam, because unfortunately, I didn't make it to the last meeting to discuss any of this because I was busy, but,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think they are, the chairs
yeah.
of both groups talk quite a bit, I'm sure.
Right.
But I think you're right, like there's and that's sort of, and it's like one piece of the equation, but like it's an important piece that could spend a lot of time and energy on if it's not directed and focused.
Right.
Right, we could all be trying to solve climate change, and maybe we should be in our own ways, but maybe not a committee to do that.
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
Or several committees.
I know that Orion has his
Right.
potential plan and brought it to the Harbor Committee, and that caused a little angst. But, if they were in conjunction with the
Yeah.
Conservation Commission at the same time, maybe we can work through those problems, and we're not generating so much anxiety over these thoughts.
Yeah, yeah.
At least, I think that's something we should at least discuss with Sam and the committee and Abby. So,
One positive is that Sam being the head of the Harbor Committee and his wife being the head of the Conservation Commission,
yeah.
I'm sure that there is some coordination naturally happening.
Well,
Or awareness of what the other's
right,
doing.
I know, but when you get all the individual people that, that aren't necessarily involved, that's where you get, because the Harbor Committee's pretty big, so, yeah.
Yeah, and there's plenty for them to do independent of, or,
Yeah,
I agree, they need to be aware of what Conservation Commission is doing, but since they've got, Conservation Commission right now has the grant and is doing the analysis of what the future of Rockport Harbor could look like.
yeah. It would be nice to make sure that both groups are on the same page.
Yep.
That would be nice,
Absolutely.
yes. Well,
So I guess the motion would be to approve the Recreation Committee and Conservation Commission work plans.
Sure,
Is there a motion for that?
sure.
Eric,
I
you wanna
move
do
that
that?
we do that. Without repeating it,
Whatever
yes.
you, okay, a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor?
We've done it.
Okay, great. And then, yeah, if you'll be in touch with Sam, is that how that works?
I'll talk to Abby.
Okay.
She's back Wednesday.
Okay,
afterward.
great.
Yep.
Alrighty. Yeah, the Conservation Commission, that was a
Yeah, there's
nice
always is.
discussion in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like Parks always provides a long one. Okay, next item is act on utility easements for Jonas Kantakos.
That's right. Yes. So Jonas has been working diligently for years in an effort to try to build this gym. Multiple sites in Rockport, multiple locations. He has a very successful gymnastics academy, I suppose, that's been operating out of the Penn Bay Y for years, decade plus or so. And Jonas purchased the property, which is adjacent to the Public Works garage right off Route 1. And he's been working on his own in large part to make that occur. And Jonas reached out to me this summer at some point and said, is it possible that the town could consider a utility easement because of the location and the proximity of where he was building and where our public works garage is. And we obviously run power and utilities up to meet our public works garage. It's really just a hop, skip, and a jump across the bog to go over to where his gym would be placed. And
Currently under construction.
Exactly.
When we were there for the,
Oh, yes. Yes. So, Jonas, the challenge was that inadvertently, the town meeting warrant, even though a year ago, the board had been given the right at a special town meeting to issue utility easements, but somehow in creating the new warrant, and us thus condensing it into the voter version that we had on a secret ballot, that got lost. But because of the efforts to try to put all of those items that were at the end of this regular annual town meeting into the charter, by the ability of the town approving those charter changes last week, you now, once again, the board has the ability to approve utility easements. So it really comes up to the matter of, do you wish to offer utility easement to Jonas to cross over a portion of Public Works property and then access his gym. I've put together a bit of a rudimentary map in the packet, which shows roughly the location of the gym. I don't think any architects will be hiring me as a result of this.
no.
But it's a square and it says gym on it. So I feel pretty good about
More
that.
than I could do.
But it also gives you just the idea of the proximity of the public works and how close we are.
And so, again, for clarity, the reason he's asking for this is because Public Works power lines are closer than it would be for him to run all the way down to Route 1.
Exactly right.
Okay.
That's exactly
Okay.
it. Yeah.
Now, where on this map, where is the line
Coming up
on the
Elwood Avenue.
town, on our property?
So
Is it close to the property line?
it comes over from Elwood Avenue, runs up Elwood Avenue. You can see that at the bottom of the drawing.
Yeah.
And then follows along and then connects first to the wastewater building, which is that first building, the very small square. You see
Okay.
that?
Yeah.
And then over to our Public Works garage. That's the black roof.
Okay, does
there.
it go in behind, basically?
Trying to picture the connection. Yeah, point to it.
Yeah.
You got it.
You're not getting hired as an architect.
Okay.
This building is actually way up here. It's actually parallel with the line up here.
Okay.
I thought it was very close.
Honestly,
We were there the other day.
The power pole is right here.
you've seen the permit.
The power pole's here, so it's literally a parallel shot along the back of these buildings. A pole would go here, and then his building corner is literally right here.
Bingo.
But-
Thank you.
So just to give you a sense of what that area is, like, can we build on it? Because right. There's
We're not
there's
losing
nothing.
valuable- It's not where the roof is gonna go.
That's where my
Yeah.
whole thought was, if the power lines are like farther over, how far does he have to come on the property, blah,
Yeah.
blah. So that clarified
Where the dirt
perfectly.
goes, where that dirt is, it
Yep.
really drops straight down into water.
Yeah. It was,
And not to like distract from this issue, which obviously the easement and so forth, but we also have some issues with water on our side of the line. And at some point, we're going to have to talk about those buildings and them sinking into that mess. Not trying to like make things bad here, but I just want to be honest that we've got some issues on our own on that side. But there's nothing that will be constructed on that side because we need to move up the hill, not in the mess.
So literally one pole
on
with
our
the
side.
easement, or if he has to go down his driveway, probably looking at 2 or 3
Oh,
at least.
Yeah, and he's had his sewer, yes, yeah, because he's I can figure out what his distance is. Hang on. unless you know off the top of your head, Scott. He's had some issues as well, unfortunately, with sewer. We've had to make some, not of his doing, but just the basis of where he is. And unfortunately, we've had, when that extension was done, there was nothing there, so there wasn't a stub there, so there was some additional work that we had to do to get him to a place where he could actually do what he thought, which was actually stub off of our connection and then move up to his building. Internet's not playing nicely right now, so I can't tell how far it is, but
But it's a much greater
it's a
distance,
much greater distance.
and it would be a
yes.
huge
Yeah, and with that
financial
new
thing,
burden on him to.
Yeah,
put
for
in.
sure.
which he's already dealt with for the sewer.
Right.
Right, yep.
All right. I move the board approve a utility easement with North Atlantic Property Holdings LLC to provide power to their building located on map 20, lot 133.
Second?
Any discussion?
I did. Second.
No
No,
discussion.
she said
Oh.
discussion.
All those in favor?
Aye,
Great.
unanimous.
Okay. Well, that's exciting that things are moving along.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, next, act on EMS planning for fiscal year 2024.
Okay. The town has obviously been, I won't try to go to the beginning, but, the town of Rockport, as well as its three partners, in Camden, Hope, and Lincolnville, have had a contract with Northeast Mobile Health Services for, over a decade, I believe. Which was born out of a RFP process that the four towns conducted at that time, largely due to the challenges that Camden First Aid Association was seeing, which was a local nonprofit ambulance service that had provided ambulance service for 70-plus years. And that situation was incredibly challenging. I was in Hope at that time, and it was difficult for a whole bunch of levels. Whatever side of that you were on, it was not pleasant because difficult choices had to be made. And I think that at that time, the four communities were not really well prepared to have the conversation. They didn't really know a lot about EMS and fire other than those who worked for Camden First Aid. And they were not prepared to even think about how towns would take on that service. I think we had a really good situation where our fire departments worked well with Camden First Aid. They had a great relationship. They supported each other. Many people were firefighters and served at Camden First Aid. There was a collaborative there. And when the financial aspect of Camden First Aid fell apart, that's really what was the driving force. It wasn't because of poor quality care for patients. It wasn't because people didn't like the blue on the side of the ambulance. It was really about the finances and the finances alone. And I would say the organizational structure of how it came to be. So the towns really didn't know what to do at that time, and they felt like a lot of times when towns don't know what to do, they say, let's go out to RFP and let's find a solution via RFP. And at that point in time, the towns saw three providers put in requests for proposal. One was Camden First Aid, which was a cost to provide to the four towns of $400-something thousand.
474, I
Yes.
think, somewhere in that neighborhood.
That's, yeah. Delta Ambulance, which was,
524.
yep, oh, you got those down, don't you? And then there was Northeast Mobile Health Services, which was a for-profit business based in Scarborough. And they provided us a number which was less than a tenth for the four towns of the combined cost for us. And largely that was because they were offering transfers. We're working with the hospitals through Maine Health. I think it was still Maine Health at that point, I could be wrong. But through that ability to you work in the transfer market in this area, they already had a base established, and they were able to quickly jump over and tackle the 911 services. And in that first few years, we went through a pretty extensive process. There were members from every select board, and the managers, administrators were part of that process, and we received an education on what does it take to run an ambulance service? What's a payer mix? What is the Medicare rates, the Medicaid rates? How does that all impact what makes a profitable service? Why is it that it costs so much? Why is it that no longer what was a very profitable service or in a nonprofit sense, is now not? We went through that process, learned a lot, and I think over the last 10 years, the towns in whole have learned a lot about EMS, more than they ever could have thought. The other thing I would also add is that Canada First Aid charged a very nominal amount to the towns up to that point. And as a result, as you know, those of you who've been through budget processes know, if you don't ask for a lot, there's not going to be a lot of questions and oversight. And so we didn't really know as communities what we were getting for the service we were paying for, because we weren't paying very much for it. All we knew is our people were happy, they were safe, and they were taken care of. And we paid very little for it. Win, 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 right? So 10 years ago, we entered into a contract with Canada First Aid, closes the stores. We sign a contract, each of the 4 towns sign a contract with Northeast Mobile Health Services, and since that point in time, they've been providing 911 EMS coverage for the 4 towns. Now, through that contract, there was the creation of an EMS contract review committee, and since that point in time, quarterly, a group has been meeting, just as Kim and Jim have, meeting and talking about how the contract is working, how do we ensure that basically it doesn't happen again to us, like what happened with Canada First Aid, and how do we make sure the care that we're getting is to the contract we've signed, right? So I'm trying to give you all this sort of background because this has been a long conversation. It's been a 10-year conversation, I think, in our 4 towns of what are we getting? What are we doing? How do we make sure we're safe? What's the right level of safe? How much do you have to pay to make sure your community feels like it's safe, that its people are taken care of, and when you pick up the phone and call 911, someone's there in a rig as quick as reasonably can be expected.
I got a question
Yeah.
on the overall concept.
Yeah.
So the towns are dealing with the EMS side of ambulance service, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you mentioned the transport. Is
Right.
that a separate thing
Yeah.
that the hospital is contracting with?
Right. So the service that we have been working with, Northeast Mobile Health Services, prior to signing the contract with the 4 communities, offered that service where they would also work for the hospital and transfer a patient down to Maine Med or Boston or wherever they needed to go, right? So financially it made sense because obviously the rates for that are better.
So that's a revenue generating,
Yes.
okay.
Exactly.
Thank you.
So there's that aspect to trying to figure out how do you do that, right? It makes sense because financially they can charge us very little. This is what the towns are saying at that time. They can charge us very little because they can make their bottom line work using the transfer service, and we're sort of just extra. They already have people sitting around. This was the conversation at that point. They're ready and able to serve because they're not currently providing a transfer somewhere for Maine Health. So for 10 years, that's been the way that it has worked. And as I said, we've had groups who have been looking at that throughout that time. So how do I get into where we are now? Coming back, there's been peaks and valleys. There've been changes in levels of service, contractually agreed to by Northeast Mobile Health Services and by the towns. And we work together. Usually the four managers will negotiate contracts with Northeast and try to find, that common ground that's sort of, well, this is what's happening, and well, we've got this and we've got that, and so forth. The current contract was negotiated spring of '22. And at that point in time, we met with the CEO, and this is the four town managers and I. And the conversation was such that, well, obviously, this is post-COVID. Wages are starting to increase. We need to make some changes to make sure that those wage numbers, we can keep people employed. We have that aspect to it. So you're going to feel an increase in your new contract, the one that we're currently under. And we're also communicating with Maine Health and trying to find a new model where we have staff in the hospital. So we can sort of, they'll effectively pick up part of the cost we would be.
Who is we?
Well, I'm getting there.
Is we the towns
No,
or them?
No. What I'm saying is, Maine Health will pick up a portion of what normally we would pass on to you, the towns.
We, Northeast Ambulance, would be passing on to you.
Right,
Okay, thank you.
right, exactly. So,
Clarity.
so what ends up happening was the amount that we had to pay through that contract would be lessened, thanks to the fact that they've worked through this other agreement with Maine Health. Subsequently, Maine Health has now expanded its own ambulance service, North Star Ambulance. You'll see them probably riding through here. They're using them more and more and more to provide their transfers out of Penn Bay and elsewhere. So obviously, I can put two and two together here and say, if you've lost transfers and your basis of this was an arrangement under the current model, funding model, there's concern in my part is, can you continue to operate? Is everything going? So we've met, the EMS review committee has met a couple times, and the answer is, we cannot continue to operate under the current contract the way we have.
As a town?
No,
That's Northeast Ambulance.
as Northeast
Okay.
Mobile Health Services.
That's where, when we is said so many
Right.
times, it's hard to keep track
Right.
of who's we.
Northeast
Okay,
cannot continue to operate with the existing contract as it sits today.
because they have lost a lot of the transport
Revenues.
business because North Star, a totally different company, is doing that for Maine Health.
Right,
Okay.
right.
Thank you.
Now, we have not begun negotiations on a revised contract. The committee has heard, what we've heard. John Powers, who's here from Northeast Mobile Health Services, may have some information he'd want to share with you about where they stand, but I'm really going off of what has been said and what has been done, okay? So, about a month ago, the town of Camden held a meeting where they began talking about EMS and where is the town of Camden going with EMS. And they took some steps that night to begin working towards their future and where that moves their service, whether or not they go on their own and begin to transport, pick up people who are injured and bring them to the hospital themselves.
So Camden contemplating starting their own ambulance service
Yep,
for the town of Camden?
That's right.
Okay.
right. So out of that conversation, and let me be clear, these conversations have been going on
Yeah.
for years,
Yeah.
decades even, about what's best for Rockport. So what's best for Rockport is a decision that the five of you have to make here. Not necessarily tonight, but at some point starting tonight, where do we go? And we are in a place of the town needs to be prepared for whatever that next step is. And that's really why we're having the conversation and why this, has been put together for you, because if, first of all, in the contract, and either party, Rockport, Camden, Northeast Mobile Health Services, can opt out of that contract before its expiry.
Okay.
Which is why the fact that they're operating in some financial circumstance that might cause a need to rewrite the contract this spring means that this is important. It has to be really built into a budget and potentially has to be really prepared for well before we get to a budget process. And that's, again, why we're here tonight. So, before I get into, maybe I'll just stop right there, and I think that sort of sets the stage in terms of why we're having this conversation and what it means. After, and I'll just sort of hand it off to Chief and to Megan, but the direction I got out of hearing what happened in Camden and their conversation is, one, there's a very real possibility that Camden isn't going to want to be part of a four-town negotiation with Northeast Mobile Health Services.
Critical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We may feel like, hey, we're really happy with Northeast, they're great, they're fantastic, but their share of the call volume is substantial, not only between all the nursing homes, but the number of people they have. So to pull Camden out of that mix of call volume puts us in a very different circumstance and conversation in terms of Rockport, Hope, and Lincolnville supporting the service, as opposed to a four-town arrangement.
Right.
Two, if Camden did go on their own, where does that leave Rockport? What are our options available to us? And so what I then turned to the experts over here and I said, okay, really we need to lay out potential of three different options. An option where we work with Northeast Mobile Health Services in some sort of arrangement, contractual arrangement. Two, a contractual arrangement, we work with North Star Ambulance through Maine Health. And that is something that is potentially on the table if we wish to have those conversations. And three, what if we had to go on our own as Camden does? Is it feasible? Does it make sense? Is there, you know, is that a conversation worth having? What does that look like?
Yeah.
And, well, you can certainly go through this, and I'll let certainly Chief and Megan talk about this, but that's sort of the baseline in terms of where we are, which is there's a lot of things still potentially available, you know, that could happen tomorrow.
Yeah.
But before you go into this, having heard this conversation for 10 years, you know, the last thing we can do, and having just gone through this with the dispatch, the phone call, right? Originally, I wasn't worried about the fact would my call get picked up.
Right.
But, okay, that became a problem. But the second part is who's responding, right? And we cannot have any drop in service, right?
Correct.
That's the most important thing we do. If we do a lot of things wrong, fine, but that's not what we want to leave. So I'd rather over-prepare. I'd rather have difficult conversations in November rather than be in a spot and coming to you in March and say, oopsie, you know.
Guess what just happened?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Who knows what that means? But so being prepared and putting us in a position where we can do that. The second thing I would add is we've been talking since the budget process about the potential of this and the potential for us to be prepared to staff where we can address these issues. So this isn't necessarily a new conversation, but it does have some wrinkles and some tweaks to it that, you know, for Jim and Eric and Denise, it's a little bit different now because things have been learned since March to November. So.
And I would imagine most of our citizens don't know that there are two different companies doing two different parts of the ambulance service business.
Yeah.
And four towns combined, one could split out, anyone could split out at any
Anybody
time.
could, yeah.
The ambulance service could split out if they decided.
Yep.
So that's a big, important piece to suck down, you know? Yeah, thank you.
There you got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Do you want to walk through what you've put together? Jason, why don't you,
Want me to go?
I don't care, it's up to you.
So, as John indicated, for the last 5 budget years, I have presented in the budget to be prepared for full-time service, whether it's just firefighters or going to EMS, that times are changing in the public sector, whether it's fire, EMS, police, we're all struggling. In my opinion, as well as many, many others out there, yes, we signed a contract. I thought it was closer to 8.5 years ago with Northeast, regardless. In the last 4 years, the service has dramatically changed for that company. They used to be all over the East Coast, down to Scarborough. From my understanding, they're pretty much down to just the Rockport office. They sold their building in Scarborough, which was their main office. The company has drastically changed. It's reduced down to bare minimum staffing here. The people they have working there, I am not saying anything negative about them, but the business as a whole. And it's not the supervisor over here, it's the business as a whole. I've been asked for years to get things ready, be prepared, start putting things together. Other towns are noticing the service has changed dramatically. I would much rather at this point now be more proactive than reactive if something happens, such as dispatch. Camden has made the announcement in their select board meeting. They are looking for housing to start staffing, permanent staffing of 24 hours a day. At the next meeting, I believe they're discussing it again. So Chief Farley and Camden, in my opinion, are moving forth with the change from just fire to fire and EMS. They currently have a license and they are currently working with Northeast, but I think they want to transition into full-time fire and EMS. As every chief person from Northeast has indicated, if one town pulls out financially, it won't be plausible for them to stay here because none of the other towns are going to be able to pull the weight. So I think I presented last year a phase 1, a phase 2, a phase 3 of Rockport Fire and where we are. I presented that. Things have obviously escalated and changed in where we are. We've hired 2 new firefighters. One starts Saturday. So we'll have 2 full-time firefighter. One's in school, the other's in advanced. As per John's request, working with Megan, we've reached out to vendors and companies for equipment to see what timeframes are availability. I have reached out to personnel from Knox, Waldo, Lincoln, and Saginaw and other counties in reference to would anybody express interest in working for us full-time if we were to do it. I have at least 5 confirmed paramedics that would come work for us full-time. I have several firefighter EMTs. So we, I believe, staffing-wise, could get there very quickly if need be. We've worked with one company that has an ambulance coming in as a trade-in that we could get for a year before a new one would be ready in December of next year. All the equipment companies have provided timelines that would work for us. If not, they have loaner equipment. I have someone talking with John that would be willing to be our EMS chief, who's been in the field for almost 30 years. Medical director, a QA. We have people lined up that are ready if we need to go in that direction. So doing due diligence, I have looked at every aspect of it. I'm not EMS, but I have someone very, very, very good at what they do that has been working with me on this to get the information. And then obviously reaching out to Megan to put numbers together because I am not a numbers person. So she's put the packet together with a variety of different numbers and aspects of it.
So basically, when we approached this, we approached it looking at 3 different levels of service. So the first level of service would be 24/7, 365 coverage with all town of Rockport employees. So that means that we would be looking to hire 3 full-time licensed paramedics and 3 additional lower level, either advanced or basic EMTs, hopefully with firefighter certification in conjunction with their EMS certification. The second option we looked at is self-supported EMS department, which basically means we'd be looking at hiring 3 additional full-time employees, and we would contract with another entity for paramedic coverage. So under this model, we would not be looking at hiring our own paramedics, but contracting with an outside source for that coverage. And the third option we looked at would be to have, again, a semi-self-supported department, hiring 3 full-time employees, but contract our nighttime coverage with another entity. So we'd be covering 12 hours a day, whether it's 6 to 6, 7 to 7, however that works out to be, and then contract for the additional 12 hours a day. When we look at hiring licensed paramedics, we would be looking at about $38 an hour. With benefits, that's about $130,000 a year per licensed paramedic. So when we look at hiring 3 licensed paramedics, it would be a combined total of $390,000. When we look at hiring 3 lower level licensed EMTs, whether they're advanced or basic, along with whether they have their firefighter certification or not, we'd be looking at ranges of pay between $30 and $36 an hour. So with benefits, that would be a low range of $125,000 per employee. High range $125,000, low range $112,000. So for those 3 employees, we'd be looking at a range of $337,000 to $375,000. Under all of these models, we would have to look at purchasing an ambulance, which I would recommend doing a lease purchase agreement for 10 years. There's no reason why we wouldn't be able to get 10 years out of an ambulance. So that would be about $50,000 a year, principal and interest payments. One of the options that we've talked about to make that payment would be potentially looking at changes to health trust that we have that was left by Marion Weidman. Potentially, if we could get those changed, that's something that we could use that money for to offset that. We'd also be looking at additional equipment and medical supplies that we would need. The costly equipment would be a one-time purchase until the equipment needs to be replaced, and then we'd have normal supplies that we would have to buy just like any other department would. So for the upfront costs for the equipment, we'd be looking at about $89,000 a year. And then we'll have other costs too, such as medical billing contract. That's not something my department is skilled for or could take on. And honestly, we can outsource it for a lot less than what we would have to pay a full-time person to do. So I've budgeted $25,000 for that, looking at other departments that have full-time EMS departments and what they're currently budgeting. So the last 4 things that I talked about would be something that we would need for all 3 options. We would need an ambulance, we would need equipment, we would need the billing services. So those costs are the same with all options because we do have a transport aspect to all 3. So for option 1, fully self-supported, all 8 employees would be town employees. We're looking at a cost of $891,000 to $929,000, depending on where the people we hire fall in that licensure wage scale. So I did the same process for option 2, and we'd be, sure.
Firefighters, I mean, my understanding last year was that we approved those to be ready and in anticipation
Correct.
of sort of what we're starting to see maybe happen faster than we expected. How did they fit into being able to staff up for EMS?
They're part of the total 8.
Okay, so we need 8, not 6.
Six
6
above
new,
that, above
but the
them,
2 will
correct.
fit in somewhere as either a paramedic or a,
One's a
EMT.
firefighter advanced, and Mike is a firefighter, and he's in the EMT class now, so he'll be a basic.
okay. Okay.
For option 2, which is the option that we don't hire any of our own paramedics, that we outsource that service. because we have not started any sort of contract negotiations for that, I had to make some assumptions coming up with a cost for that. We would have to assume that any for-profit business would want to mark up what their actual costs are because they're in the business of making a profit. So from that, we could assume that there would have to be a percentage added on to whatever our actual costs would be. So for that paramedic coverage, I assume that it would be about $425,000, which is 60 some odd thousand more than what we would pay on our own. Again, the wage cost I figured out the same way for an advanced or basic. We would have the ambulance, we'd have the medical equipment that we'd have to buy, and we'd have a medical billing contract. So for option 2, we're looking at a range of $926,000 to $964,000. Again, depending on where the people we hire fall in that categorization of their license levels. Option 3 is the option where we would outsource the overnight coverage. Again, for this, I had to make some assumptions for what an overnight coverage contract would look like. I'm assuming it would be around about what we would be looking at for paramedic coverage. Again, the total cost of that would be anywhere from $901,000 to $939,000. And then on the last page of the letter that I included in your packet, we also want to look at what estimated revenues we'd have coming in to offset some of these expenses. Again, we would be able to bill for calls. However, we would have to build in some kind of forgiveness for people that don't have medical coverage or have what they call bad debt payments, meaning they're not making the payments for the services provided. So based on some research on what our estimated call volume would be, we're placing a number of 160,000 for option 1 and 2 because that's would be our 24/7 365 coverage, and then I cut that number in half for option 3, which is the option that we would outsource our overnight coverage. We could also look at grants, donations, and possible endowments. I did not put a figure to this because it's hard to say what that number would be. So then you're looking at a range of option 1 essentially being the cheapest, an average of $731,000 to $769,000, to the high option as being option 3, $821,000 to $859,000.
I guess this is for my knowledge. So there are services that you can contract the staff?
I don't feel comfortable saying who we've talked to that would cover those.
No. But I didn't know there was such a thing.
There's a community relative to us that would be willing to cover our overnight coverage. And then there's another service that has stated they'd be willing to cover our paramedic coverage for 24/7, 365.
So potentially like in conjunction with some of their people? I mean,
Correct. So basically,
It's not
they
like a
would hire the
temporary
people,
hire.
and then they would place that person at our
Okay.
West Rockport Fire Station.
And then they would just be there for a shift, rather
Correct.
than just being able to use a paramedic when we need a paramedic.
Right. But like I said, realistically, I mean, you would think that they would want to make money on whoever they're putting in that spot. So if they're paying similar to what we would be paying, that's going to cost us more for them
Yeah,
to
I'm
make
just,
that
was
profit.
trying to explore whether there's a way to avoid paying 8 full-time employees who are waiting for when they're needed. And if the and I understand, but when we start talking about contract labor, I start to think, well, then we don't have to fill them full-time. We pay a premium to this other company or entity. So I think that's sort of where,
I mean, in this day and age, you would assume that every employer is going to provide some sort of medical insurance. I have found in the research that I've done, municipalities are able to offer that insurance cheaper at an overall cost because we pool our insurance, and most private businesses can't do that. So when you look at those health and costs to the employers, payroll taxes, other benefits that they're offering. I mean, theoretically, it's going to cost more than
No,
what
I'm,
it's
I'm
costing
really
us.
still not, I'm trying to explore, and maybe it doesn't exist in this environment, an on-call paramedic, so you're not always paying to have a paramedic sitting at a desk somewhere, and you pay a premium for that paramedic when you need them, but you don't have a new full-time employee. And I'm not trying to distinguish in this case between whether they're an employee or a contract. But here, we've sort of assumed that a contractor would be a full-time, would operate full-time for us. So I just, in this world, is that,
Absolutely. So there are agencies that run off of per diem, similar to kind of what dispatch is doing temporarily. So it's a list of people that have full-time jobs elsewhere. You make a calendar, and Kim signs up to work Monday from 12 to 12 as a medic or as a driver. You can do that. What I will tell you, when speaking with a few of the agencies, it's very, very, very difficult from a scheduling standpoint because they are on call per diem versus having a set schedule of 2 people on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They're on a set schedule for an entire year.
And your per diem employees, you'd want to live relatively close to the coverage area, especially if their expectation isn't going to be that they're at the station ready to go, that either they're coming from home or they're coming
Yeah.
from wherever. You would want them relatively close to the service area.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that was what was going through my mind, like, where would they come from?
Yep.
You know, if
Yeah,
it's
no,
called-
just
yeah,
trying to
yeah,
explore. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
this is $1 million we're talking about here, and we may not have a choice, but I think we sort of owe it to our taxpayers to sort of explore all the ways that we could keep them safe,
Yep.
but also explore options.
And so, I'm assuming the ambulance will be based at the new fire station?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. So that's already built into the plans?
And that's where the sleeping quarters and everything
We
are.
designed that station specifically, again, 3 years ago, we started meeting with Rockland, Penn Bay. All of us started meeting, even Union was involved about regionalization, consolidating resources, moving to more of a centrally location, and West Rockport obviously is the hub of 9017 in every which direction to all these locations. So when we designed the station, it was specifically taken into consideration the future of regionalization or Rockport. So we have multiple sleeping quarters, multiple bathrooms, male, female, a kitchen with, accommodations, meeting room, duty room, 4 bays. So it was specifically designed for this future.
That's good.
So in option 2 and 3, where is the paramedic coverage coming in?
So option 2, the paramedic coverage would be contracted with an outside source. Option 3, it would be split. We would have to hire, I don't remember if it was 1 or 2. We'd be looking at hiring non-paramedics and paramedics for option 3, and then outsourcing or contracting that additional 12 hours. So in any given 12-hour shift, we assume that there would be a paramedic and 2 lesser licensed.
At,
So daytime would be
We
the
would cover
Rockport
half, and
full-time
then they would
employees
cover the
and-
other
Right.
half.
Okay.
And is that what Camden, I mean,
They're going,
if they
their
go,
decision is going 24. In speaking with, I believe I'm over 18 different people I've spoken to, only one would prefer a 12-hour shift. Everybody prefers the 24-hour shift,
yeah,
especially because some of them are traveling from 45 minutes to an hour away. There's somebody that lives in Camden that's been traveling to Portland Fire for 15 years because he prefers the 24-hour shift. There's people that live here that go to Bangor. There's people that go from Ellsworth to Scarborough. So people travel for the 24-hour shifts, not the 12-hour shifts. So that's going to be
it
extremely
opens up a
difficult.
labor pool
It's
for
completely
us, then.
different.
Yeah. I wanted, I mean, this is great work. You had mentioned there were 3 options, which included sticking with Northeast, looking at North Star in the hospital.
Well, it's
and
within,
and then
sorry,
switch into doing our own.
yeah, it's more within the realm of trying to decide whether it's option 2 or option 3 in terms of not putting a names to them, as opposed to saying this is what the modeling might look like as to what they are. So not saying, oh, this is the Northeast option, this is the North Star option. It was more of, this is how they could work. I mean, we could take another spin by these, for your next meeting to say, okay, this is, we've had some conversations, this is where those proposals are. But it was more of where we started a year ago, well, not even a year ago, I guess it was March. We went from phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, right? And we had that was very much based upon the idea of a 12-hour day. The 12-hour workday was really the basis of a lot of what we were building towards potentially if we went to a 5-person situation. These numbers, talking about 24 hours coverage, is a very different conversation to me from what the board had at that point. So even just to look at these numbers and say, is this, where are we going? What does this really mean for us? To me, that was important.
But these
putting
three
it
options
together.
are all about us doing our own ambulance service. It's just how we actually accommodate that. But you had indicated that the other three options, I thought you were talking about, well, I wrote them down.
Well, I guess I looked at
Northeast Ambulance, working with the hospital,
Yeah.
North Star, and then doing our own ambulance.
I looked at the contract services as where that sort of comes in, where we're sort of talking about the contract with another agency.
For just paramedics.
Fully contracting with somebody else.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's not here. No, that's what we have now is sort of,
But when you introduced
Yeah.
the topic to us,
yeah.
maybe I misunderstood. I don't think we've ruled out, I
No,
just
no.
need to hear more about
Yeah.
then what's going on with Northeast, and what about North Star and the hospital?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To make sure we've looked at all of our options, not to take anything away
That
from all the important
I
work you're
believe
doing.
the towns requested pricing from North Star
Yeah.
for the full contract.
Okay.
Again, just in speaking with Mike Senical, their number is going to be larger than what we've presented on all three of these to do full-time coverage.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't want to put them in a bad position, but they had we had met with them this summer. We had requested some information. We were supposed to get it in October. We haven't gotten that yet. We're supposed to meet at the end of the month with Maine Health. I had a conversation with Denise Needham the other day about where this is and what's being talked about tonight. But I don't want to put either of those services in a bad place because of the fact that I feel as though that it's important for the board to recognize where the town of Camden is on this situation, and not to draw the connection with wastewater, but even if we're solid waste, right? Camden is the biggest payer into the solid waste facility. Let's talk about solid waste instead. If Camden decides to do something completely different than to bring their trash to the quarries over there, we have some big challenges that we have to face. And what I heard out of that meeting a month ago was that there's a potential that could happen. And if so, we were not prepared for this board. We hadn't given you the information to really have that conversation.
Now we're back to talking about EMS, we don't have to worry about the solid waste facility, right?
Right, exactly. We're fine with solid waste right now, but this is light years different than what we talked about in the spring.
Fair enough,
I don't want to put you in a position where you have to make a decision without any sort of backing of that.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of helpful information. So Northeast, we just want to be prepared if Camden's going to back out, when we don't have a sense of is it in anticipation of their upcoming budget year that they're doing this?
That's the way it sounded in their meeting.
Jason and I are meeting tomorrow with Audra and Chris Farley. So we'll know a little bit more at that point in time. Again, we're sort of reading between what was said at their meeting and what seemed to be, I think, an endorsement of moving in that direction. And before we met, they'd reached out to meet with us today, in fact. And I said, well, actually, I think I wanted the board to have a chance to, sort of have the same sort of conversation that their board had a chance to do a month ago, which is to look at the future and what does the future look like with a lot of different options on the table, and where do you go? This is something that Rockport has never done. Our costs for firefighting are minimal because we have tremendous firefighters. Our volunteers are, top notch. We've been able to make do with less because of their hard work. And at some point, that I won't even say luck, but that good fortune that the Rockport has had will run out. And we've talked about it, and it's been in budget meetings. Camden could be that game of sort of Jenga. They could be pulling that one block away that makes the tower fall over for us. Nothing that the town of Rockport has chosen or wants to do, but is merely the fact of where we are. And, I took, from what was said in their meeting to say they're seriously moving in this direction. So if that occurs, things can move very quickly with private contractors, Northeast, North Star, Maine Health, City of Rockland, and we can't be left last where we somewhat were with Camden First Aid 10 years ago. That's sort of where we are.
Camden has also started working with Hope. Hope is starting a first responders program similar to what Camden is doing already. Hope is joining in on Camden's license, so one could presume that if Camden goes out on their own, maybe they'd want Hope to help subsidize whatever service they're offering.
So, okay, this picture that you're presenting is, it gives us the number, but it's a little inaccurate in the regards that I don't remember what we're paying now for our contracted services. So what would be the actual increase in the budget, saying we went with option one?
We are paying Northeast less than $200,000 a year.
Yeah, okay. But that's what I need, so we're still looking at over
531,000
Yeah.
to 759,000.
Yeah, right. So, that does make a difference in what we're looking at. So, assuming that we can get the Marion, what's it called?
Weidman.
Thank you. Changed, that would basically cover the ambulance lease fee for the next 10 years.
That would be my recommendation, yeah.
Assuming it can be changed.
That's a huge assumption, I think.
We'll have to,
Yeah.
Right,
it's worth looking into, but.
right. We'll hope that logically that makes sense. Medical billing, and you're saying you're getting that number based on other people's.
What other cities
cities
and
are paying.
towns are budgeting for their medical
typically
billing.
medical billing agencies take a percentage of the collections. That's how I've always did it, but maybe in this case it's a little different because it's ambulance billing.
In the budgets that I looked at, it was just a flat
Flat
fee number that
fee.
was in there.
Okay, that's nice, okay. And the equipment is so you have the 89,000 is equipment, but that would really be a 1-year thing initially.
Until it
and
needs to
then
be replaced.
And then we'd probably reserve 5,000 a year or 4,000 a year
Right.
every year.
And
to
then we'd
keep
have
that
normal
replaced.
operating supplies, bandages,
Right,
gauze pads,
that's
things
over
like
and
that.
above, yeah. Okay, so, all right, and we haven't looked at EMA grants or FEMA grants or anything yet?
Orion is currently working, I believe, on a few different options, obviously for grants for ambulances, and there are some larger grants out there when you are talking about regionalization, consolidation, changing what you're doing. Part of this process with our conversation tomorrow is, yes, Camden may have a license, we may have a license, they may have an ambulance, we may have an ambulance, but we will be working together car accidents automatically will draw an ambulance from each town to whichever town it is.
Right, yeah.
So
Same thing we were doing now. I mean, we're still
the
gonna
same
have
as
the
what we do in
regional
fire. The
cooperation.
exact same
Right.
thing we do in fire.
But I just want to make sure that if we're looking at any of these options, that we are looking at
Absolutely,
every possible angle for grants, whether it's 5,000 or $500,000.
absolutely.
It's interesting. I mean, I know we are going to be asked the question, why aren't we doing this with Camden or with Camden and Rockland? What's the response?
I'll let John answer.
Well, it's somewhat of an answer that probably you could better provide, but there was an effort 2-3 years ago where the chiefs for the three communities, Rockland, Camden, and Rockport, got together and tried to devise a 3-town solution that could be expanded to, somewhat, expandable beyond that, but effectively would provide service to the 3 towns. The cost for the 3 towns was almost $10 million annually. So now you could, obviously the 10 million wouldn't go to Rockport, but if you sort of prorate it and figure out, it's more than what we're talking about here by a good chunk. Right, yeah, exactly. So there's different levels of service, and that's, Rockland provides great service for Rockland. I think Camden feels like Camden provides good service for Camden. There's Rockport approach, there's Camden approach. And the one thing when you sort of walked out of that conversation, the only way for Rockport to be able to get into a conversation where it could then potentially join a 3-community, collective, you're going to have to spend enough just to hire people. And that was really what was the driver of those costs for Rockport. I mean, it was talking about, I think, 12 full-time firefighters in Rockport, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
So we're shy of that with this. And, there's other things that would have gone with that. But, I think
We'll have 8 full-time.
we would have 8, right? So it's,
This plan does not address the need for full-time firefighters. While we're conjoining
Unless-
an EMT firefighter combination, we're not really addressing a firefighter concern. We're trying to address an EMS concern with these numbers here. I think if we were trying to address a firefighter concern as well, we'd be looking at a lot more employees than what's in this.
And was that the
proposal here.
3-town solution, was both firefighting
Yes.
and EMS?
So in the research that I've been doing, I absolutely truly feel that the firefighter side, we could hire 4 full-time firefighter basics to be the second person on shift with that paramedic. So we would still always have a firefighter on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And again, talking with everybody that I have, that's not going public, that's not putting advertisements out. There's more than enough firefighter basics or even advanced that would be able to fill that position. Without,
So
in my
we could
opinion.
accomplish a little bit of.
I mean, Camden right now has, I believe, 8 firefighter EMTs, maybe 1 advanced in there, and they have a paramedic as well. So they have a handful of firefighter EMTs already on staff.
and I think this might be a good time, after what had occurred in Camden sort of had come to light, there have been residents who have been concerned about what is the future of EMS in Rockport. And Chief has been talking with a lot of those people. There's a lot of interest in financially supporting some of these needs that we're talking about in this letter, or in this memo that Megan's put together. I think that, in conjunction, we talked about the Weidman Fund, right? So there's, just for those who are not familiar, there's a fund that Marion Weidman had given to the town of Rockport for hospital-related costs, medical-related costs for those in Rockport who could not afford. And that fund is nearly $500,000 today. And the challenges for those listening are that it's very difficult to operate that in a world of HIPAA, in a world of a consolidated hospital that's really run out of Portland and not run out of Rockport. And this is something that Rockport select boards have been talking about and trying to fix for generations, it seems. There's some thought that potentially those funds in that trust fund could be allocated to a potential to use, because largely a lot of the costs that that ambulance services or EMS services are for those who can't pay their bill. It's for those who, the uncollected, it's the, yes, there are the frequent flyers, but a lot of people who, those $500 ambulance calls, they don't have insurance. It costs the same for them as it does for me who has municipal insurance, right? And so a lot of the costs that municipalities are bearing is because they're uninsured. There's a fit there in terms of trying to cover those costs for our residents. The second thing that I would add, though, is that there are people in Rockport who have handsomely supported community needs all over the place. I mean, we're sitting in a room that largely was constructed because there are a lot of people in town who thought this was a need, and we're able to find a way to make it cost a lot less for those of us who are taxpayers than it should. You know, on the other side, I say the costs that we're talking about here are personnel, right? Personnel costs live with us forever and ever. So we're not going to run away from personnel costs. I think if we could get endowments, or we could get, build an endowment, or build, fundraising to a level where we can offset our capital costs, our equipment, our rig, that would be a huge step forward. Really, I think we're looking at the billing side as trying to offset our costs for personnel. But even like when you look at this spreadsheet here, it's not enough. It's still not enough, We're still in the red under any of these circumstances. And, if you look at, option 2 or option 3, which are more expensive, but you can trim back and say, okay, well, it's going to be twice as much for a contract with someone else to provide a service, or there's still going to be an operating in the red. And we've, from the days of being $30,000 for 4 towns for Northeast Mobile Health Services to now where we are, we're not going the other way. Unfortunately, it's a question of how quickly are you going to get to a place where you're spending some of that money. And I know I've talked with a lot of people who are on Northeast or on Camden who said eventually we're going to be paying that. That 400 that sort of boggled our mind and sort of made us, well, how can they ask for $474,000?
Actually, 407.
Okay.
I double checked.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Either way,
Yeah,
we're talking
either way.
easily double that number here
Yeah.
now, and
That
that's
was 10
just
years
one
That was
ago.
10 years ago. I
And 10
mean,
years ago.
if-
Yeah. So just a little bit of there is support, and I think Rockport residents, like our police department, for a town of 3,000, our needs are 3,700. You could look at another 3,700 person town in, the middle of Oxford County, let's say. Their needs are very different than ours, and there is a distinction there. We're one of the oldest counties in Maine. We're one of the oldest towns in the oldest counties in Maine.
Not from being around, we've got oldest residents.
Right. Yeah. So there's a cost there. On the plus side, a lot of them have insurance. A lot of them have Medicare. A lot of them have Part D coverage, which is great and allows us to make sure that service works. But we also have some people who have the ability to give. And I think in the same way we've been successful in some respects with, the rec field, I think we have people who want, in this building, more than anything. I think there's some success there we could build off of. But
I'm not sure how much more of this we need to do tonight.
Looking at poor Mr. Duke, the other Mr. Duke.
This is phenomenal information, all that stuff, but I think this is gonna take a little more than,
Yeah, I don't think
tonight.
we're in a position
Yeah.
to make any motions tonight, but really appreciate the background and the information.
Want to say anything?
Yeah, John, do you want to?
I would love to, if we have the time, I will.
You're here, let's,
So a few things. For those who don't know me, my name is Jonathan Powers. I'm the division chief for Northeast Mobile Health Services here in Rockport. We have been operating out of this base for about 16 years. I'm sorry, Jimmy, you're able to hear me?
He's got a mic.
And been providing services for roughly a decade, as Mr. Duke had mentioned. We have made some structural changes. I will go off what Chief Beasley said, just to correct some of those things, is that we have merged some of our divisions to try and streamline our operations as well as trim some of the waste. Like any good business does, we try to consolidate, we try to save that bottom line, and we try to save it on the customers as well. So we did merge the Scarborough and Biddeford base into a division in Saco, where our home office is now. Most of our business, our transfer business, is in the southern division of the state. We also operate divisions out of Brunswick, which has become a little bit lighter staffed than it was in the past, just because we no longer can have the 911 contracts in that area that we once did. We also have a division in Jackman, and then, of course, Rockport. We are largely an à la carte service. We will provide whatever services somebody is looking for, obviously at a cost. We are a private service, there is that bottom line, but we do work with our partners. And as an example, we provide a paramedic-only fly car out of the Jackman area. Working with that municipality there, they are able to provide grant funding that funds having a paramedic fly car dedicated to that region, and contracted just for the Jackman Region Ambulance. They do a few other things, working with the health center there, but primarily funded through grants through the municipality. With that à la carte, it all depends on how the municipalities want to build that program. We're willing, like I said, we are willing to work with the communities that we partner with, and be able to provide whatever they're looking for, in ways that any way that we can. Some of the perks of having that contracted service is it generally operates at a fraction of the cost. We do spread that cost across multiple communities while we can work with those communities, and which reduces your cost. The transfers also add to that, and we do still continue to do transfers. We haven't, there is a high demand for transfers. We weren't able to provide all of those services for the local hospitals, even with 4 ambulances. So there is a high demand, and we are still getting responses and requests for those transfers. So we're still hoping, even though we haven't finished deliberation on our numbers, this all came about very quickly, and in a time that we aren't quite prepared to provide those exact numbers. We're hoping to have those by the end of this month to present to the town managers early December. So we can start having those discussions. But whether these discussions are coming up much faster, we are not quite prepared for it, nor have we been invited into those conversations, to be quite frank. We're happy to work with folks. As the letter mentioned, building an agency that would work collaboratively. And I am more than willing to work with our agencies if the agencies are willing to work with us. Happy to have those conversations. Happy to have those discussions, but we need to be invited. Unfortunately, today I found out about this meeting through scuttlebutt from Saturday. So I feel a little underprepared to have these conversations, but again, we're happy to sit down and discuss what our options are, because the options are endless. As they provided three options here, I'm sure we can come up as a group, and we could probably come up with a dozen more. EMS is a very fluid, very community-centric system. There's private, community, nonprofit, there's fire-based, there's non-fire-based, there's union-based. I mean, it's endless. Again, we're happy to have those discussions with the community.
So even we've had this historic 4-town contract with Northeast, and then if Camden, the big player in there, pulls out, what you're saying is that there's still an opportunity within Northeast to work with Rockport.
We would certainly have to restructure. I mean, obviously, there may not be the call volume or the demand. So one of the things that you get right now for this is you have the availability of generally 3 ambulances, as I've mentioned in the past. 2 ambulances, plus we usually have one that does transfers, but when it's not on transfers, we make it available for the 911 side of things. So just as Mr. Duke had provided before, when they're not on transfers, they're available to the communities. So the subsidy really just provides that standby time for guaranteeing a truck available in the community or in the 4 communities. So it's not just dedicated to the one, but if Rockport wanted one dedicated to Rockport 24 hours a day, that's certainly something that we could look at budgeting for, and providing that cost. You know, as I said, we always have one ambulance available in these 4 towns. Now, if it's already tied up on another 911 call, it may not be available to Rockport. That's happened, according to the numbers, 9 times this year. So out of the call volume that we have provided, there's only 9 times that we've called mutual aid, and some of those are for, to provide a second ambulance for incidents. Some of those may even, going back, we had to call for the fire alarm at the hospital. I don't know how many times those have happened. Those aren't included in our numbers, but we still work with our mutual aid partners to provide the services that the communities ask for. Rockport requests that Rockland be automatically started for the hospital, and Rockland gets automatically started.
So you had mentioned 3 ambulances available. If I recall, at the previous, not this past meeting, but the previous review meeting, you had explained that I think you were staffing down overnights so that you're only staffing for 1 ambulance overnight. So that's not 3.
So it's, as we staff up, if we need to staff up, we have availability of actually 4 trucks. I could put on staff if the contract required or requested and funded those positions. We could staff up to 4 trucks in Rockport. We have the apparatus already sitting here in town, fully equipped, ready to go. We just need people. We just need the funds to provide those people and a contract that's going to back that requirement. So while we do, during the day, regularly have 3 ambulances, they aren't dedicated to 911, so I don't want to give anybody that impression. One of them is dedicated to 911. The other 2 may be unavailable on transfers, generally local. We are doing a lot less long distance than we used to. So that generally the turnaround time isn't too bad. But we do have that 4th one always available. So depending on what the town wanted, whatever services we can provide, we can certainly negotiate that.
Yeah, and I guess for an apples-to-apples comparison, we would want a full-time ambulance. I mean, realistically, that's all we would have. We don't have 4 ambulances. We're not talking about having 4 ambulances available. It would be a Rockport dedicated ambulance.
And currently, we're paying like a fraction of what the numbers were, right?
Yeah, what
Oh, yeah.
Megan said, under 200,000.
Today, it's roughly 200,000. As Mr. Duke had, and we've talked about with the town managers as well as the committee, is that we will need to be looking at, because there has been such a drastic shift in the way that business in this area has been done.
So it sounds like you might have some numbers for us for our next, or for John, for our next meeting by the 13th,
Maybe.
or I mean, the 11th?
We're hoping to have we're hoping to
Okay.
schedule the meeting with the town managers in early December.
Okay,
So whether that coincides with or before the December 13th meeting, I can't speak
I
for their
misspoke,
schedule.
11th.
Trying to get all 11th, trying to get all 4 town managers together may pose it's more difficult than we want.
Yeah, and I would add, just to John's point, I mean, anytime we've asked anything, I mean, that I've asked in terms of contract or staffing, if we as a town speak with one voice and say, this is what we want, they can provide that, right? Contractually, we can have. The other thing you have to also realize is part of this is that we're part of a 4-town collective, right? So there's Rockport's needs, but then there's Camden's needs, and there's Lincolnville's needs, and Hope's needs. And to get the 4 towns to agree on anything, wastewater, those things can be a challenge sometimes. So my point is just that it's, when we first put this together, it was a very loose organization of needs, and those sometimes can stray and fray. And, we were sort of all in the mix because we all lost our provider at the same time. But as we all know, Camden has their own view of things, and we do, and Hope, and Lincolnville. My point is, I think John can provide a contract of any level. There's a challenge, though, in that the call volumes, and there's a cost, there's a cost to that, right?
Yep.
As you had said, and, when we were going through this 10 years ago, Rick Petrie, who's now with Northeast, told us, who was sort of hoping to organize the 4 towns, you need 2,000 calls to have one paramedic rig. Well, we're not gonna have 2,000 calls in Rockport
Let's
by a
hope
long
not.
shot.
Let's hope
Yeah,
not. Yeah.
so to pay for itself, we're not gonna be there. There's gonna be a deficit, whether we work with Northeast or North Star or North whoever.
Or fund it
Somebody else with
ourselves, or-
North in their name as an ambulance, or Rockport, it's gonna be a cost that's gonna be substantial.
Yeah.
And it'll be in this budget this spring. So.
Okay. Anything else on this topic? Okay, so more to come.
Beautiful, thank you.
Thank you
Yes,
for all the
thank
the important work you've been doing.
Yeah. So do we need to have a motion to table this?
I don't think we have to do
I mean,
anything.
this-
We just had a nice
No,
discussion.
This was like,
Yeah, we're not,
we're not gonna do that.
we're not
right?
gonna,
No
we're
action
not
on it.
buying
Just
an ambulance.
tabling all this.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
there's no
tabling
action
this
on
for
it.
now.
No, we are going to turn to,
Good.
I think we're ready for our discussion item. Wait, where's my agenda? Wastewater's after. Let's not torment
Yeah,
our county
county
budget
man.
rep. So, Bob, do you want to come talk to us? Are you still? I was trying to give,
5 minutes, Bob.
well, thank you for everybody on that other discussion. It's an important one, so.
Very good.
Thank you, Jason.
Yeah.
Okay,
My comment, based on the last discussion you just had, is in another time when small towns all work together and we had a really strong functioning county government right now, that is a service that counties should be providing, not individual towns.
totally.
So,
I couldn't agree more.
anyway,
Yes,
my little bit of comment there.
in a different world, yeah.
Didn't I say that earlier?
So,
think
did you
we've
guys
all
get a
been.
copy of this budget?
They got a link to it.
A link to it, yeah.
And I gave them the county taxes and dispatch fees, so they know what Rockport's cost would be.
Okay.
Just gonna look at the screen.
I'm going to give an overview, as broad as I can. So we are now in the second year of two large increases in the county budget, and there's not a heck of a lot we're going to be able to do about it. Last year's county budget was just under $10 million. This year, it's just under $12 million. We have 115 county employees, and I just did a quick check. If there's a page 7, if you ever go to it, it's a really good one-pager if you're interested in one-pagers. And if you look at wages and benefits, the personnel cost for the county is almost $10.3 million. And we just had a conversation about what the cost of an employee is. And that is really what's driving the majority of the increase for this year. In our corrections department, first of all, we're down 9 employees in the corrections department. That's where we put all the nefarious people in the county if they get in trouble, and we are struggling to staff that properly. Our state is flat funding our jail. They don't give us any more money next year. Apparently, the governor feels the $1.8 billion that she has in the savings account needs to stay there and cannot help us incarcerate folks. So that's a push down to the local taxpayers. And so our corrections department, there's 2 numbers that are driving our costs, impacting our costs there. Our labor costs are up $400,000 in corrections, and we've lost, or we project to lose, between the state funding shortfall and the boarding of prisoners, another $370,000. So it's about just under $800,000 just in the Corrections Department that either the state is short funding us or we are not realizing fees from other jails that would board their prisoners at the Knox County Jail. The Knox County Jail houses on average about 50 prisoners on an average night or average day. It has a capacity for 70. Our former sheriff, who is now the police chief for the city of Rockland, entered into an agreement, and I believe the commissioners were involved with this, in a collaborative arrangement with the Waldo County Jail and the Twin Bridges Jail, so our north and south neighbors, that shares boarding, where we can't charge one another for housing our prisoners if we need capacity. So that's where the loss of revenue has come from with the boarding. Does that make sense so far? All right. I know you don't like the news. I'm not going to give you really any good news at all. In the patrol area, we are down, I believe we're only down 3 people in the patrol division. That cost is up $500,000, and that's all driven by labor. And in the communications division, we are down 8 people. We are still away from being recertified by the PUC to be a 911 center. We're down 8 people, and our costs are projected to be an additional $240,000. I believe that $240,000 may climb an additional $100,000 because we have an arrangement with the Waldo County Jail, Waldo County Communications Center to handle our 911 calls. It was projected in this budget for us to only need them through the first quarter, at the end of the first quarter of next year. The commissioners and the budget committee both feel that we need another 6 months or get to the end of June, and hopefully we'll be ready and fully staffed and trained to be ready for to us to be back up to full service. So the those numbers that I just threw at you were $1.5 million of the $1.9 million that we're up for next year. So then there's the problem of the LD1. You folks all have to deal with LD1. And we have, somewhere in here, our tax cap limit for next year is 5.7%. Well, there's a problem. That means that the commissioners and the budget committee have to vote a second vote to approve exceeding the LD1 cap. That's probably likely, or we're going to have further problems with patrol, corrections, and communication. So another bit of bad news there. Rockport's costs, combined costs, you may have seen this, but your Rockport's combined costs between your county tax for county operations plus dispatch fees will be $1,575,559. We have had 2 hearings. We've heard both corrections, patrol, communications, airport security, and some other smaller departments like the DA. So the big money has already been seen and heard and deliberated, and we've made little impact on that $1.9 million. I will say that I've been doing this too long, and I will tell you that the budget committee that is currently serving all the districts is probably the best budget committee I've ever heard. I've ever seen. I mean, they ask great questions, but the biggest problem is after we've had a 17% increase last year and a 20% increase for next year, and I said this at the last time I was here seeing you folks, is that the Budget Committee does not have control over labor agreements, which are the biggest part of our costs. And we do not make policy. We cannot change staffing. And I just do not see that we're going to make any substantive changes, like the commissioners would have to make substantive changes in the operation of county government. I don't see that happening. I think, just like that last discussion you just had, we're looking at global tax increases, local tax increases, and I see nothing that will stop it. Nothing. So, sorry to be such a bearer of bad news. I'm happy to answer any questions. I mean, like I said, I've been doing this thing. I can turn this thing inside and out, and it's, the only thing we've done up to this point is there was a EMA position that was prior funded that never showed up on our past budgets, and it was funded by a federal grant, and we chose, well, up to this point, we've chose not to fund it for next year, so. But that's such a small thing, so. Anyway, like I said.
Well, we've seen the pros and the cons of trying to, tweak budget numbers, and if you understaff or underfund a communications
It comes back to
911
you.
service, you haven't done yourself.
I mean, we have, in the past years, I give Andy Hart credit. He has especially been a steward of all our buildings. We have we have the old courthouse, and he's done a great job making sure that mechanically it's sound. The bricks are always, seems to be pointed every year. I mean, he's taking care of stuff, but that comes at a cost. I will say one other thing. The good news is, if you want to call it good news, is that somewhere in here is the ARPA page. So the good news is that we still have ARPA money.
I was wondering about that.
And so,
600 and
and
something.
so, not that I agreed with how the commissioners spent, or we spent, some of the money, but if we had not had access to the ARPA funds, it's likely that our county tax would increase an additional $500,000 to $600,000. There was a significant amount of equipment that normally shows up in an annual budget. And there is a line in here, there is a page in here that talks about computers and that type of thing that the ARPA funds covered. So, thank you for the federal government, I guess, but that'll eventually dry up and go away.
Yeah.
And wages will continue to go up. But the days of 2% and 3% and 4% are probably gone for a while. And benefits are up 10%, I think. So, anyway.
Yeah, and then structurally, if there are things that can be done at the county level to try to, it's frustrating, obviously, for all of us to see the county taxes go up, and yet we all are frustrated that the county isn't doing more.
I'd love to show you guys my notes, because I get this book about a week ahead of time, and I write all these things that there are probably about a dozen no's in the executive summary that I said, there's no way, I'm not approving that. I'm not going to go with that. But I'm only one person, and the majority will ask questions, but they'll make a decision based on, is it needed? And in most cases, yes, it is. So, anyway.
Yeah, pretty much what I expected out of you anyway. I mean, when I looked at it initially, I'm like, it's all labor, so there's nothing you can really do, because we can't sit here and complain that we had issues about not having the right labor, and then complain that
then not
we're
wanna
raising
fund the labor.
raising the taxes to fund the labor. So it's,
Well, the Waldo County agreement, that 3-month agreement, that additional $94,000, which would be foolhardy not to fund it, because we're probably gonna need it. I
Yep.
mean, the last thing anybody, we're just talking about ambulance service for a minute. the last thing we want to do is have this dispatch center fail. We have to get it back up and running.
Yeah.
And we're gonna end up paying to have that done. But if we don't fund Waldo County long enough to get ourselves with our feet underneath us, then it's gonna fail.
Right.
And we'll close down the center, and we'll have to sub it out to somebody else.
Yeah, right. That makes perfect sense. I mean,
You know, the one thing I disagree with, honestly, is we offer, in the patrol department, every patrolman has their own vehicle. In the police departments, mostly, you go to the station and you use,
Whatever's-
one of four cars or whatever. That's
Yeah.
a fairly large expense, but it is also an incentive for patrolmen to come to work for the county.
yeah. I noticed a lot of counties around the country do that, though.
Every.
It's not an uncommon thing county
Right.
side.
And I think part of it is, they're scattered all over the county, and to respond, you're not gonna drive your personal vehicle there,
Yeah.
so.
And that's what it comes down to. If you're living far out or even in the next county over, not having your vehicle makes it difficult. You're not gonna run all the way to Rockland to get your car to turn around and drive all the way back.
The other thing is that because of the loss of employees, we have a significant amount of money built into the budget for training officers. And I forgot what the number was, $45,000? I think it's $45,000 to train an officer from nothing to be independent. You got to do the 18-week course at the Criminal Justice Academy. Your corrections officers have to have a 250-hour training. Your communication, there's 2 levels of communication training. All of that comes at a cost, and because we've lost all those people, we have to build into our budget,
The new training costs.
bringing us all back up to full strength. They are having success hiring staff at all levels. So the good news is maybe, just maybe, we'll ever be at 100%, but that part of it will get better. So,
And I guess this is sort of well beyond our budget committee representatives' purview, but I would sure like to know whether there are discussions happening at the county about how it can work better and be better structured and provide more services to the towns.
So, let me change my hat just a little bit, because I currently serve on Knox County Charter Review Committee. That's not the Charter Commission. We're reviewing the charter now. We have, in the works, in the proposed charter changes, one of the big things I feel is we're going to probably go from 3 commissioners to 5. That will
Nice.
add, if you just looked at yourselves and just said there were only 3 of you
Yeah.
up there instead of 5,
And
it
maybe
it
one is
changes a
missing.
town, it will change the county.
Yeah, I've been saying that for a while, that 3 people is not enough to manage a budget of this size or a county of this size. It just doesn't work.
Well,
So-
and then no 2 of them can talk
Right, you're not able
without it
to,
being a
Right.
meeting.
yeah.
Right. So that's the biggest change. There are a lot of other smaller things that you'll hear about. But right now, it's not going to end up going to a charter commission. We're trying to keep the changes sort of on the down low, and then it would be presented to the commissioners, and then everyone in the county has to vote for it. But that'll be a big change, I feel.
Yeah, and that's important to have.
Right, because right now, there's, keep my thoughts to myself a little bit, but the 5 people having a discussion like you guys have had tonight is way more fertile than 3.
Yep.
Well said.
But we really should move to regional services for a lot of stuff.
Totally.
But you can't do, you
We're going to
can't do.
bankrupt
under the
ourselves if
certain-
we don't
Under
figure it
the
out.
circumstances right now, in these times,
Yep.
it makes it really hard for any town to say, oh, you want to take over EMS?
Right. Wait a minute. Yeah.
It's not the time. Yeah. So,
I appreciate that.
yep.
Well, thank you very much for, if other people have questions, yeah, for the honest, well, and
Straightforward, I like
we,
it.
we appreciate your
If
representation
anybody out
of
there wants this
Rockport.
position, they can have it. It doesn't pay well.
We're fine.
All right, thanks.
Well, thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thanks, Bob.
I'll also add that tomorrow on the county commission's agenda, they're deciding what to do with the late fees charged to communities who decided not to pay
That impacts
their
us.
dispatch fees. So stay tuned.
Okay,
We
well,
may have a little more we got to cough up, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
So
That does ring a bell.
something to look forward to.
it's only a couple weeks, what the.
All right, where are we?
Okay, we're going to put our wastewater commissioner's hat on. So I guess we need a motion to move into wastewater commission.
Well, might as well see here.
Move that we exit the regular session and enter the wastewater commissioners review.
Enter into wastewater commissioner.
Yeah.
Second.
Second. Michael, Eric. All those in favor? Okay,
Now I want to go home.
yeah, that's why we're voting for it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's,
Now we are wastewater.
now we have
commissioners, right?
wastewater, now we're in wastewater commission,
Put on a
and,
different outfit.
That's right.
yeah, we need little hats.
We should have different hats.
We could have toilets or something.
I want roll of toilet paper, plunger.
Okay, so, John or Scott, do you wanna?
I'll let Scott go because
He's all
so
set up. Good.
there was a little bit of an error when I typed this up. It didn't save my changes to that part of the agenda or the comments. So I got an email from Ryan like, this isn't an amendment to the ordinance. I'm like, I know. And then anyway, Scott was going to be here anyway. Scott will save the day once again. So 2 meetings in a row. Why not let him solve it? So
Well, this is a hot seat.
It's a-
yeah, I know.
warm over there,
Should have
huh?
taken the other one.
Must have a seat heater. Well, as you have seen with the correspondence I've given you, we have a building which is behind a building. And the ordinance is reasonably clear in the sewer ordinance in number 5 under 402, which is building sewers and connections, and that's, I think you all have that. If you read number 5, it says a separate independent building sewer shall be provided for every building and enter separately into the town sewer, except, and the exception is A and B. So when you read A and B, that explains the exceptions. That's kind of based upon the state rules for septic systems and rear buildings, and there's some reasoning behind it. The reason that this is here is because if you connect a building out back with a building out front, you can't connect them internally. It has to be on the outside of the building. And if that lot could in the future possibly be split, then that leaves a residue for improper land sales because there's no easement or anything like that. So that brings in B. So now A and B, if you read those together, A needs a little bit of work to be cleaned up, and I'm gonna hand that to Orion, see if he won't do something with that. And B is pretty self-explanatory. I do have the owner here. She's sitting silently up there. She'll probably clap if I do a good job. But what this needs is the authorization before I can issue the actual permit for this to happen as the local plumbing inspector, and I'm listed for this type of thing. We need to have that easement that will protect the town for any access to plug the pipe or something, should something happen. And that connection is going to be, and you correct me, Peggy, if I'm wrong, that is just on her property. So the easement has to be on her property to allow us to access this connection that we're talking about. And my suggestion, if the board will approve this, is to give it to Mr. Duke to write an easement for this. that will allow the town access should the properties be sold.
So I understand, you're saying the new building from the back, that will connect right by the street?
Yes.
Okay,
But
into the
big
existing line
problem-
of that property.
The big problem was the main line sewer is across Pascal Avenue. And we're looking at the very first house when you come onto
Oh, yeah,
Pascal
yeah.
from Route 1,
Yeah.
which is a 60-mile-an-hour speed zone, I think it must be. because
No,
They all seem to, people seem to be driving that fast
It
around
appears
there.
that way.
Well, if I slow down, I think I'd get run over.
Yeah.
But it's a dangerous situation, and it is across the street, and it's been not too far back, resurfaced.
Yeah.
And she's kicking up some pretty high numbers, like $35,000 to get across that street.
Right.
So she struck a sympathy chord with me, and I knew about this, but I was a little bit reluctant to go that way, because I do believe each should go separately into our sewer line. But this is a case where I don't think it's logical.
And it does appear that the sewer ordinance allows this if we approve it.
If you approve it, it's
Right.
perfectly
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah, it makes total
I think
sense
it's a
to me.
no-brainer.
and given the fact that we're going to probably start to see with the accessory dwelling units and the different, you know, these in-law apartments or whatever, this is something we're gonna see more and more, right, Scott? I mean, this
I think it
is-
will be.
Yeah, for ADUs.
Yeah.
It
So-
could be, and it's gonna be interesting.
Yeah.
So we'll be,
Yeah,
Well,
good
we-
to think about the
I
easement.
mean, we don't want to be tearing up roads just to tear up roads, so, I mean, they're bad, they get bad enough as it is without throwing in patchwork, and, I mean, we're gonna have to come up with some method of figuring this out and deciding that lots can't be split or something in the future anyway, so. But, yeah, I mean, this,
I think it's very logical.
Yeah. So the motion is not as written.
yeah,
So is the
No,
motion,
it's not in there.
it's not written correctly. So Scott says, I'm requesting of the sewer commissioners to approve my suggestion as the local plumbing inspector to allow, yeah, so a motion to allow 7 Pascal to enter separately into the town sewer, take that language from here.
yeah, that's what I was trying to figure out,
Is
comparing
it
it to this.
specifically for Pascal, or is it just for,
Or
or is
just-
this in general?
No,
Yeah.
I think it's just her. I don't think we're making a general,
Yeah.
No,
right?
it's
No,
just
this
her
is
Well,
property.
it's literally just this
this
property.
Property.
If
we're-
this
Right.
happens again, then you'll
We'd
see
have
my
to keep-
smiling face
Okay.
over and over till you get tired of that.
What's
and we'll
that,
fix it.
7?
Yeah, to allow,
Allow her to-
So,
7
connect.
Pascal.
Pascal.
move that the board approve to allow 7 Pascal to enter separately into the town sewer from the secondary rear dwelling through the sewer connection for the front dwelling, as is allowed in ordinance section 4025A.
Right.
That's what it,
So are we
And B?
doing to allow the connection or to allow John to do an easement?
well, that's a second
Okay,
piece,
okay.
I think. I mean,
Yes, that would be B.
yeah.
Okay, okay.
A could be done just by your approval, except B is still gonna be applicable because of the way the ordinance was written.
And maybe
So,
give to the town manager the authority
I'll second your motion.
under 5B to draft an easement.
There we go.
should we do them
We
separately,
can
though?
set it till 10 o'clock
Well,
looking at
I
it.
guess,
I think so.
I think they can be combined. They're just sort of
Okay, and
continuous
then-
sentence.
So we can do another
Give the town
motion
manager
and give the town manager the authority to draft an easement pursuant to
5B.
section 4025B of the ordinance. Yeah.
Period. Okay.
perfect.
Is there a second?
Second,
Great. Let's see, I better draft, I gotta get these names. so I
You
don't
got that
forget.
draft, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna go back in and, what am I, little handwritten?
Yeah, I just wrote 7 Pascal,
let's see, Jim.
blah, 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 to here.
Hour, 2 minutes.
Eric made
41 seconds. 2 minutes, 41 minutes, 2 hours, 41 minutes, and you can go right to it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Very, thank you.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Great, okay. And then we need a motion to go back into regular session.
So moved.
Second?
No, don't they wanna do your?
Oh, yes.
We have to do the Camden
Sorry, I
thingy.
forgot about the Camden
Back
payment.
out.
Thank
Rescind
you,
my motion.
Megan. We were in such a hurry to, okay,
Nobody recorded that, right?
we didn't, let's just back up from there.
Wasn't acted on.
So, just quickly, we have, we owe Camden money for sewer, and we have a mediation agreement with them as of May 8th that provided certain agreements about how we would, what we would pay them. And we'd like to have further discussions with them about the mediation, we'd like to get the lawsuit dismissed, and they have said, well, pay up first. You still owe us. You know, the number is $465,000, and we have the money, it's in reserve. And what we would be paying them is the full payment for their July billing, is that the right? We've had two billings from,
Two billings,
yeah,
right. Go ahead, come up.
yeah, might as well
You're
have
gonna
Megan
wanna-
give us the numbers.
Big, this is,
The only sheet I printed off, I think John gave it to
I
you.
got it.
Oh.
Do you want it?
I don't remember what I said.
Make a run for it, why can't Scott?
So I'm missing a word in here, so.
So this would be for full billed payments up through June 30th of 2023, presuming that they post that payment we sent to them and they signed for on March 27th, as of March 27th. And then it's adjusting the bills that we got 7/28, or that were issued 7/28 and 10/26 to the mediated rate. So based on my estimates, which were as of June 30th, our payment should not exceed $465,179. In fact, it should be less than that because they've charged us 4 late payments since I did this in June, which that payment from March should have been posted prior to that. So that would reduce those late payments that they charged July, August, September, and October.
So what was your number you had?
465,179.
And that's the number you had, Denise?
Only because I got it from Megan.
Gotcha.
I mean, it's-
But that's taking off any late payment fees?
So that was doing the late payment adjustments when I did this June 30th. after
for
that.
the lost check,
Right. But
not for other things where we are late.
I didn't
Right.
have time to reduce the late payments between June 30th and today, prior to this meeting.
So it will be less
So
than
it'll be a
that.
little less.
Right.
Right. A little bit.
Okay. And the June billing, just for clarification, does or does not include the 15% discount from the rate?
So they billed us July 28th, which they billed us at their normal rate. I then reduced it to what our mediated rate was and took that difference from what our balance owed was.
43.
Yeah.
Yep.
What did we decide on that? We haven't.
So-
That's the answer. We haven't.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I mean, basically, we're paying everything that's not in dispute.
Right.
And really, I think that's, let's get the money to them.
So basically, we'd be paying them $27,000 short of what they say we owe.
Okay.
Also, presuming that they adjust that payment, I mean, they posted that payment 10/17, and it should have been posted 7 months prior to that. So, and to come up with like
The
the late
March
payment
payment,
adjustment,
yeah.
right? To come up with the late payment adjustments, I basically did backwards math to get into what they were charging us for interest. So I can't say for certain that that's what the amount is, but it should be fairly close.
Well, they'll argue
So-
no matter what.
So the amount,
Exactly, so.
so the amount that we're going to pay is at the full rate? Or
It's gonna
or
be
it's
at
our
the-
adjusted rate?
Yeah, and I had been thinking we were
adjusted
going to pay a full rate for the first payment because that was before our new budget. And then the new budget number for October would be at the discounted rate. But I think
Right.
within
Wasn't your mediated agreement from May, though?
It was, but there's two issues there. One is that we had the mediation, but neither select board had approved in full the mediated agreement. But then John had an email exchange with Audra about moving forward with our wastewater budget, and she confirmed that we were entitled to use the mediated rate going forward. So it's just trying to sort of limit the scope of what we're still arguing over when it's, the amounts actually themselves are quite small.
So conceptually, we're prepared to pay up.
Because we can't have
Where
any.
does the final number come from? After,
Well, then the
telling
final
Camden?
number comes from a discussion about what we do with the mediation agreement that in good faith the parties agreed to. And their select board may no longer agree with that, but they don't want to talk about that until we've paid up. And that's why it's important for us to get a check over.
So this would pay everything through the bill they sent 1028 minus the 27,000 that we don't feel that we owe based on the mediated rate.
So are you okay with that, John?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, I
Okay.
mean, this is a, going into this, I mean, I think it needs to be said, it's certainly not what we would have hoped for in terms of an outcome of what we're trying to, in fostering an arrangement that places the costs squarely in terms of, we know that we're paying this number and this is exactly what Rockport's cost of treating and pumping the water is. It doesn't meet that standard, right? And I don't think, but that's what mediation's about. Sometimes you don't get what you want. But I think this is an attempt for the town to say, we're gonna close that chapter on the book. We're gonna move on to another chapter where we say, okay, we've paid up, we have some sort of mediated arrangement. I met with a property owner the other day who was just, I can't pay $20. I said, I know you can't. What do we do with that? Well, what we do with that is we have to look at our options, and either we find some way to find a further reduction in the rate with a different type of conversation we've had with Camden.
So a property owner saying, I can't pay this sewer rate
Right.
that you're charging me.
Right. Or, so either we sign something with Camden, we find out something on our own. And that's those are our options. We've gone to the point of being sued over this, this matter, and unfortunately, it's not giving the relief we want.
The outcry this time certainly hasn't been as aggressive as it was the last time we were up this high, but I'm hearing from the same people, my sewer bill's crazy. Like, I can't afford to live in my house paying a sewer bill like this.
Yeah.
And it's not, I mean, it hurts our homeowners, it hurts our business owners. So
And
then it's affecting
I
our workforce.
appreciate that. I just want to also, because this is public and all of that, we also understand that this is only a part, what we pay Camden for sewage treatment is only a part of,
Yeah.
it's less than a half of the overall sewer bill, which, just means we have work on our end to do too, to see what we can do in this next budget session to really look at our, well, I guess it's not the budget session, but this next year, what we can do to reduce Rockport's own costs on the sewer side as well. I would like to know, I feel like, John, you and I had talked about potentially paying the full rate when it wasn't part of our new wastewater budget.
Right.
And while we take action tonight, I'd like to move the authority up. If you can give us, Megan, is it half of the $27,000?
$12,767.81.
Just because I don't want to come back to everybody,
Right.
and it would be.
Every week we do
It's
this.
cleaner in my mind if we pay them through this last wastewater budget, the one that ended as of June 30, and then we're setting the table to talk about what.
Well, this wouldn't be funds that would come out of our June 30 budget. Because it was billed to us in July, it comes out of our current year operating budget.
So when John contacted Audra to see how we should
It was for our current operating budget.
And it did not include, I mean, it included the the July 28th billing.
Correct, because as of July 1st,
Okay,
they increased
then-
their rate to whatever their new budget is.
Okay, so then that fairly comes within what we understood Camden to be telling us.
Correct.
That we could bill our users with a 15% discount. We could build a whole annual wastewater budget with that discount,
Yeah.
which we did in good faith. Okay.
Correct. And I even backed into their build rate to make sure that they billed us at their new rate, and they did. Like
Well, I
their
know
new
that.
operating rate.
I know that, I just,
Well, and I would, part of the reason why this is a bit of a oddity is that both Camden and Rockport approved their wastewater budgets post July 1, which usually that doesn't happen. Usually it's end of May, end of June, and then we're off to the races. This was a little bit of a, yeah, not the way anyone would have wanted it.
Okay.
So I think that's why it
so
got.
let's stick with the
overall.
amount Megan's calculated, and I'll just make the motion. so
Okay,
just-
one final question. So the amount that he's talking about there is what we believe we owe, and Camden will say, yes, that's what we think you owe.
Well,
That's what I wanted to know.
Yeah, no, it's important to be aware of this. That's what we were told, what our town manager was told by their town manager in writing was the correct number to build into our wastewater
Oh,
budget.
yes, that part I know, but I'm just going.
Since then,
Yeah.
they've had a select board meeting in which the town manager proposed to the select board members that we should not get the 15% discount because now we weren't committing to get off their system in 6 years, which had never been those were not in the mediation, those were not contingent one or the other. The 15% discount was to reflect that Camden had capital costs in its system that were totally unrelated to any costs in treating Rockport's wastewater. That was the rationale for the 15% discount. It wasn't because, oh, poor Rockport. It wasn't like, let's just do you a favor. It's like, historically, Camden separately billed all of its taxpayers for the capital costs in its sewer system. And then recently, they've changed that, and they're wrapping their capital costs into their wastewater budget. And they recognize, I mean, at least as a settlement offer in the mediation, they agreed to recognize that a minimum of 15% could be deducted from the Rockport bill to reflect these capital costs, and it could go as high as 30% in any given year, depending on what their actual capital costs were. So that was the agreement in mediation. That was the basis on which John contacted Audra to just confirm, since we didn't have select board action yet on the mediation, but to confirm that we could rely on that in developing our wastewater budget. And then subsequently, their select board took an action that called that into question. But I think they're still willing to talk to us about it, but they don't want to talk to us until we've paid the bulk of the bill. So I think that's the action tonight we're doing, is in good faith, paying the lion's share of what's in contention. We would suggest that it's the entire amount owing after the mediation.
Okay, so they may just have a
So
quib-
that
quibble-
$27,000
a quibble over
might-
that, of the
might
new
be-
rate
That's the
since a
quibble.
certain date.
That's the
yeah.
quibble.
But other than that, it should be
Yes.
concrete.
It should be
basically.
concrete,
Okay,
it should be a
perfect.
basis to, at a minimum, to dismiss the lawsuit, because it's not over the issues that were in the lawsuit.
Yes,
Exactly.
sold.
Okay. I move that we authorize the town to make a payment to Maine Water for the amounts owing to Camden for wastewater treatment in the amount of not to exceed $465,179.09.
Do you want us to make that payment prior to them reposting that first payment as of September? Okay.
Yep. Yeah, I would love that check to go out this week if we can.
You can, and we can send it out tomorrow.
Yeah.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor? Okay. Now we can exit wastewater. Is there a motion? I think we,
So moved.
so moved. Okay, and Jim, you want to second that?
Second what?
To get out of wastewater commissioner?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, then I
I
don't
thought
have
we
to-
were.
No.
I just make a motion.
Okay,
I know,
and
but
now
we
we
had
can
to
have a motion to
backtrack.
adjourn. Oh, do we want to do liaison reports?
Getting late.
I have nothing.
Do you,
You wanna
all
take them
yours,
straight?
well,
Well, we kind of covered,
the EMS?
yeah, we kind of
you
covered a
think?
lot of the stuff as far as the changes to the staffing, and John shared that. They're adding some staffing here, I believe, in the Rockport, but he also was explaining how they merged one center, and
Thank you,
obviously the
Megan.
budget info as far as not having the transfer business as the supplement would definitely have an effect on what their budget was going to be for the towns. And there were discussions at the meeting as far as responses and some things that maybe they would have to do better or different, as far as whether they call for mutual aid or not. Some judgment calls there. That was kind of called into question a few times. And John said, yeah, we need to do better. When you have a two-vehicle car accident, you need 2 ambulances, and it, you know, it's a few instances like that, based on my history with EMS and a few others, it didn't sit well. And I'm just going to editorialize a little bit here. I was on the Camden First Aid. I was on the board at the beginning, took some time off, was on the board at the end. Some of the stuff I'm hearing now is a lot of the stuff I was hearing then. John mentioned that while we were losing our service, we wouldn't have if the towns had said, yeah, let's go with a 407, which was a realistic number, you know, but it was too little too late. It should have been building up to that over a number of years, and it didn't. So maybe Camden First Aid would still be around if we had gone that route and continued through the years. We've had a bargain for 10 years. We took the bargain.
Yeah,
After 70 years, Camden First Aid closed its doors. Delta came with an RFP of $524,000. You got 2 at 400 and above, and one at, I think it was 31 or 35,000. That's a big difference, and townspeople are like, yeah, let's go with the cheap one. They've served us well. They're great people on the service. But now we're back in that same position, and I think as Chief Peasley has said, and a number of people have said, nobody understands the cost of an EMS service. Nobody cares. They just want an ambulance there.
yes.
But, people need to realize it's not cheap. It's not free, and the bargain isn't always best. So we do have some hard decisions to make before we get in the position of, oh my God, who's going to show up?
Right.
So,
Well said.
yeah,
Thank you.
it's scary.
Yeah, it is. That's the one thing people expect is,
It costs the same whether you have 1 call or 5,000 calls.
Yeah.
You've got to have,
get the ready.
you've got to have that rig and that crew sitting there waiting.
It's life.
And you'd really rather have 1 call.
Yeah.
We don't want to get our money's worth on this one, because that means everybody's going to the hospital.
And I would just add to that, the one thing that I would, out of that last go-around, we went through that, it happens fast. And so my fear is that we're going to somehow get in a situation where we're going to get a call someday where we're not operating anymore. And I'm not saying, look, I think that they're doing everything they can
Right.
to try to keep that service and live to the bounds of the contract we've been talking about, right? That I don't think that there's an effort to try to not do that, but it's like dispatch where things can happen, right? And we see what's going on, and You know, if there's a world where we're going to be moving in a different direction, we're going to have having conversations like we had tonight, so you understand sort of the lay of the land a little bit, will help. Because there may be a call that I give to Denise and say, Denise, it's happened, and then there's a quick meeting, and all of a sudden it's an emergency meeting, and
Special town meeting to approve
right,
expenditures, yeah.
that can happen, and that's not good planning on our part, right? But the better prepared the five of you are to make those tough decisions when we're there, it's going to make a difference. So
How close is Camden to pulling out?
I think very close.
I don't see how they can operate without Camden.
And I think that stems back with Camden First Aid.
Yeah,
If all 4 towns weren't going to be part of that,
yeah.
then Camden couldn't operate. So, you know, I think it's a very similar situation now, that if the biggest one pulls out, I know it's à la carte and they can ramp up or
Oh,
they can
yeah.
ramp down, but it's going to cost us
Gonna
that
cost-
much more.
Exactly.
Because if they're going to cover for Rockport, Hope, and Lincolnville, the cost per town is definitely going to go up for them, to make it worthwhile for them to stay in this area. And, you know, and back in the day, Northeast was huge. It was massive. And I don't know exactly how many people they have, but they're not as massive as they once were, and it's a little scary. I
It
mean,
almost
they're-
sounded to me, Kim, tonight, that Hope, if Camden pulls out, Hope will go with Camden.
I think
got
that's
that
right.
impression too.
So there's,
So there's another one, so now there's 2 left. So
That's right.
it ain't gonna happen.
right.
I mean, they're gonna say, it's been nice doing business with you.
Or it might become a complete contracted to us at $1 million a year.
Right, at the same rate.
Well, that's what's gonna happen.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, and I think in the discussion, it was brought up that North Star was going to be fairly pricey too. So the reality is there, you know, 10 years ago it was 400 to 500,000. With inflation, you know, those numbers are realistic.
Yep,
It's just a big jump to take. It's a huge jump to take.
yep.
And that, you know, I don't want to color anybody's opinions of anybody on the basis of this, but when the basis of what you do, if you're a for-profit business and the basis of what you do is transfers, well, yeah, gone, but also if the basis of your business is transfers, and you're an ambulance service, your focus is there. And we've seen this for 10 years. I believe Northeast has met its contract. I'm not taking an issue with whether or not they've fulfilled their contract. But there is a different level of service with a company that is on the basis that's for profit and trying to make their way on a transfer basis, as opposed to one that's focused on 911 service. And we're used to volunteer firefighters in the town of Rockport who give their blood, sweat, and tears to the fire service and our people. There's a culture issue there that has existed for that time. And so, but we get one for free and we pay for one. That world is ending, whether it's today, tomorrow, or 6 months from now. We're unfortunately, we're gonna have to pay somebody somehow. And that culture, you know, while it may assist us on the fire side for a little while longer, this is, unfortunately, we're in it. You know, we're in it. But anyway.
Make a
Should be
motion, we adjourn.
Thank you, Kim.
I second that.
All those in favor?
Thank you.